My name's Alice, and I'm 26 years old. I'm married to my husband, Rob, who is 4 years older than me. We fell in love at the office where he was my superior in the sales department. He pursued me with unwavering determination. At the time, I was only 24 and felt that marriage was too soon, but he was incredibly passionate, saying things like, "Please just become my wife for now. We can figure out the rest together. I'll make you absolutely happy. No other man in the world wants to make you happier than I do." In the end, his fervor won me over, and I saw in him a man who would take care of me for life. So, I decided to accept his proposal. A year after he began courting me, we got married. Now, we're celebrating our first year of marital bliss. Since it was a workplace romance, it felt a bit awkward, so I decided to change jobs. I'm considering taking a part-time job at a bakery. "That's a good idea," Rob said. "You can also take some cooking classes and enjoy a leisurely life." The truth is, his family is quite affluent. Incredibly, his father bought us an apartment when we got married. I feel a bit guilty about it. "It's okay," Rob reassured me. "Let's take advantage of what our parents can provide. All you have to do is be a good daughter-in-law." Okay, I guess. I've done my best to be a good daughter-in-law, like visiting my in-laws with gifts. "We're just happy that a beautiful girl like Alice has become our daughter-in-law," they said. "That's right," Rob's mother added. "He's a bit of a handful, isn't he? Please take good care of him." "Sure," I replied. They are very kind-hearted in-laws. Of course, my parents are also pleased with this marriage. They warmly welcomed Rob, who is well-educated and on a fast track in his career. "When are you planning on having children?" my mother asked. "It's easier if you start raising them early." "Well, we're thinking about it. It's better to have them sooner rather than later. Raising kids requires a lot of energy." "Well, it's not like I want to go out and party anymore. I guess I'll try to be a good mom." It's nice to be able to talk so candidly with my own mother. I started thinking that it might be better to have children sooner rather than later. In this way, everyone in our family was blessing our marriage, except one person. My older sister, Susan, is not happy about our marriage. She's 6 years older than me, at 32. She has been a white-collar worker for 14 years since graduating high school but has never had a boyfriend. She has always seen me as her adversary since we were little, and it was always a bit scary. I have memories of my sister bullying me ever since I was a toddler. Even as I grew up and became aware of her animosity, her bullying was insidious. She would tear up my notebooks and hide my pencil case, petty pranks that really irked me. The worst was when she'd take the diary I kept hidden in my desk, show it to our parents, and laugh. Though I wasn't writing anything strange, it was still very discomforting. It seemed she didn't like that our parents were fond of me. There was another deciding factor: our looks. To put it modestly, I was born with a well-arranged face that took the best features from both my parents. My sister, on the other hand, didn't look anything like me. She had a plain face, curly hair, and impure skin. It seemed she had a complex about her looks, but I was at a loss about what to do with her antagonistic feelings toward me. Even though I was cute, I wasn't at the level of a model or an actress, just an ordinary level of attractiveness. I always thought that instead of being jealous and mean to me, she should have been trying to make herself prettier. However, she seemed to be feeling her complex deep inside. After graduating from high school, she started working right away and saved up money. Just before turning 20, she underwent plastic surgery. At the time, I was only 14, and I was shocked to see my sister come home with a blue bruise on her face. I thought she had been violently assaulted, but apparently she had undergone plastic surgery on her eyes, nose, lips, and entire facial contour all at once. After a while, when the swelling and bruises subsided, my sister looked like a different person. She still had the look of someone who had plastic surgery, but she was prettier than before. Above all, I thought it was okay as long as she was satisfied. At that time, I believed that since her face had become beautiful, her heart should also become a little more beautiful. Even though we were not very close as sisters, I hoped this change would improve our relationship. When I announced that I was getting married, my sister made a sarcastic remark. "Huh, you're already getting married. Aren't you a fool for selling yourself short?" Once again, I realized that we would never get along. After my wedding, it seemed she had undergone more plastic surgery. Her skin was unnaturally shiny, and her eyes appeared even more double-lidded. Only she knew whether she felt improved or not. Despite our strained relationship, my sister started visiting my house frequently, sometimes even staying over. Sis, what's up? What's wrong? Because you got married first, Mom has been nagging me about finding a partner. I'm just waiting for the right one. I see. So, it's uncomfortable at home because of me, and now you want to stay here. She even brought her personal belongings with her. It was too forceful and annoying, but I couldn't just kick her out. I assumed she wouldn't visit often since she didn't like me much, but she started coming over at least once a week, sometimes even 2 or 3 times a week. It was becoming a real nuisance. We began having strange living patterns, like having dinner with my husband and her, and drinking together when she brought alcohol at night. I wasn't having much fun, and her presence creeped me out. But for some reason, my husband Rob didn't seem to mind and always welcomed her. I finally asked him, "Hey, aren't you bothered when my sister comes over?" "Nah, not at all. She's a great gal, always bringing little gifts and stuff. The other day when she stayed over, we even went to the train station together. She's really something, isn't she? And boy, she's quite the looker from the side." Side profile: she's had work done, you know. She never brings me any gifts. So many things didn't add up, but seeing him so chummy with her, I couldn't say a word. I tried giving off the "please don't come over anymore" vibe, but my sister didn't catch on. Days went on like this until one day, my husband dropped a bombshell. "Listen, I'm sorry. I'm leaving you, Alice. Susan is pregnant." I couldn't believe my ears. "Say what?" "It's a long story," Rob said, "but I just met with her. She's already 10 weeks along. She even showed me the ultrasound picture." My head was spinning. Ultrasounds out of the blue. I couldn't wrap my head around what was happening. What the heck is going on? Just as I was about to give my husband a piece of my mind, the doorbell rang. My sister was standing at the entrance of our apartment building. I buzzed her in and invited her inside. It was about time I got an explanation for all this madness. "Oh, Alice," Susan said as she entered. "I know this isn't ideal, but you'll still congratulate me, right?" She pulled out an ultrasound picture from her wallet with a smug look on her face. "Are you out of your mind?" I snapped. "Out of my mind or not, you should face reality. Rob is the father. We've been in love, you see." My husband looked uncomfortable, but his affections were clearly now with my sister. "I'm sorry, Alice, but you're still young. You can start over. Now that things are this way with Susan, I gotta step up to the plate and make her happy. No man alive wants to make her happier than I do," he said, echoing the same line he used when he proposed to me. It seemed he was completely drunk on himself and his forbidden affair, blinded by my sister's pregnancy. Stupid man, I screamed inside my head. My sister was still wearing that smug look on her face. She walked into the room and stood next to my husband like she owned the place. "Rob, let's get on with it," she said. "You know your sister will do the right thing and step aside for her big sis." So many emotions were welling up inside me. My sister had always been the sneaky kind, doing all sorts of nasty things behind my back. This, however, was the ultimate betrayal. When she heard I was getting married, she laughed it off. And now, to add insult to injury, she's taken my husband. At that moment, my feelings for my despicable sister and the man standing next to her turned ice cold. But I thought to myself, I'm not going to let them have their way. There's no way I'm getting divorced. No way, no how, over my dead body. "What?" my husband exclaimed. "Why not? What about the baby your sister is carrying?" I couldn't care less. The very idea of you two being involved makes my skin crawl. So he had been seeing her and had the nerve to come and hang out in my room, and the 3 of us had been breaking bread together. I was beginning to think he was doing it just to tick me off more than anything. I didn't budge an inch. "I won't give you what you want. I don't love him anymore, so he's all yours, but no divorce. Go ahead and have your little love child." "Excuse me," my sister shot back. "You say that to your own sister. You're one to talk, doing this to your own sister. Just pack up and leave. This apartment was bought by Rob's parents, so I have a right to stay. I don't know what planet you're on. You're just the other woman who happens to be pregnant with my husband's child. I'm the one legally married to him. There's no way I'm leaving." "Don't you talk back to me," my sister screamed, her face red with anger. Maybe she thought she'd win if she got pregnant. Well, she's got another thing coming. I glared at her. "If you keep pushing, I've got a few tricks up my sleeve." Seeing me stand up to her for the first time, my sister looked a bit shaken and said, "Fine. Anyway, Rob will be mine. Keep on struggling. It's pathetic." She stormed off. What a piece of work. I made up my mind not to consider her my sister anymore. Ignoring my husband, I went to the bedroom. He mumbled something outside the door, but I pretended not to hear him and continued giving him the cold shoulder until he gave up and slept on the couch. The next day, I took action. I went to my in-laws to spill the beans, figuring I needed to make the first move before Rob did anything. They were shocked and apologized for their son's behavior. That darn fool. No way in heck we're accepting this. That woman's outrageous too. Oh, sorry, she's your sister Alice. No, I've decided to cut ties with her. I can't believe she's pregnant with my husband's child. Exactly. We're on your side, Alice. Let us know if you need a lawyer. Thank you. I don't plan to divorce him for the time being. There's no need to give them what they want. Is that okay with you? Absolutely. We're here to clean up our stupid son's mess. I thanked them and left. Next, I went to my parents. I thought my sister might have talked to them, but it seems she didn't have the guts to tell them yet. What? What on earth is she thinking? Gives me a headache. What are you gonna do now? You should come back home. No need to be with that man. Yeah, that's what I'll do. I decided to leave the apartment and go back to my folks. There was no way I was living with that man. He was probably sneaking around with my sister and treating me like a third wheel. I thought to myself that I should play my cards right. My sister didn't come back to her parents when she realized I wasn't returning to the apartment. We essentially swapped houses, but I guess it's fair to say I came out on top for now. I managed to move my stuff out of the condo with the help of my parents, and it seems my sister moved in as soon as I moved out. When I reported this to my in-laws, they were livid. No way we're okay with this. And who do you think put up the money? They went ahead, changed the name on the deed, and just sold the condo. I had to chuckle when I heard about it. My sister and her now husband looked none too pleased as they moved out and rented an apartment. As for me, my husband kept begging me with tears in his eyes, saying, "Please agree to the divorce. We have a baby on the way. Do you want to make your sister a single mom?" I was adamant. I won't agree to a divorce. That's final, and I didn't budge. He threatened legal action, but I said, "Go ahead, make my day." To ensure he didn't file for divorce behind my back, I put in a request to reject any divorce papers. If the other woman had been a stranger, maybe I wouldn't have been so stubborn. But since it was my sister, I knew they'd flaunt the baby to my in-laws and parents, making it impossible to sever ties like you can with strangers. I endured a wicked woman who thought everything would be fine as long as she had a child. I knew I wouldn't move on and find someone else just like that, so I planned to drag this out as long as possible without officially splitting. Then I decided to make a triumphant return to the same workplace as my husband. I reached out to our mutual boss, explained everything, and got my job back. Tough break, but you're still young. You'll bounce back, my colleague said, cheering me on. Since I blabbed to everyone at work about what my husband did, he got the cold shoulder from everyone. Dude, that's messed up, getting your sister-in-law pregnant. That's some next-level creepiness, they said, and he ended up quitting because everyone was giving him the stink eye. Serves him right. 9 months later, my sister had her baby. Neither set of parents acknowledged her giving birth. My good-for-nothing husband, who painted himself into a corner, told me about it. "It's a boy," he said. "Oh, really? Given all the plastic surgery she's had, I bet he doesn't look like her, huh?" I replied with a bit of sass. "Wait, what? Plastic surgery? What do you mean?" he asked. But I just said, "Who knows?" and hung up. Turns out my sister, let's call her Susan, ended up having Rob's child without marrying him. They're living together now, but at the end of the day, they're just two unrelated people. She's not even really a common-law wife. It's pathetic that two grown-ups who can't get their parents' blessing are living together and having a kid. What's more, he can't find a job. My sister, who's got a nasty streak, is apparently complaining nonstop because things aren't going her way, and he's so frazzled he can't get hired anywhere. My sister quit her job when she had the baby, and now the two of them are living by draining their savings. But even if they manage to live somewhat normally, cold stares from both sets of parents await them, along with a life where they are whispered about behind their backs by society. I wonder if my sister really liked that husband of hers. Did she do all this just to get at me? If so, I think she's kind of pitiful. We're estranged now, so it doesn't matter to me anyway. As for me, I am finally thinking of giving my good-for-nothing husband the boot. I'm going to go through a lawyer to make sure to claim alimony, and I think it's time for me to get ready for the next chapter in my life. I'm glad I didn't just hand over the role of being his wife when he was over the moon. If I had done that, I'd regret it for the rest of my life. This past year has been really tough, but I'm going to forget all that and move forward.
I pushed open the front door, my bones aching after a grueling night shift at the ER. The house was quiet, too quiet for 7 a.m. Usually Leon would be bustling around the kitchen, brewing coffee and packing Tyler's lunch for school. "Leon?" I called out, kicking off my shoes. "Tyler?" No answer. My heart quickened as I rounded the corner into the living room. There, on our faded floral couch, sat Leon. A large suitcase rested at his feet. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Why are you home at this hour and with luggage?" Leon's eyes met mine, and I saw a mixture of guilt and determination that made my stomach churn. "We need to talk, Irma," he said, his voice steady. "It's about us. And Edith, I'm leaving." The room spun. I gripped the doorframe to steady myself. "Edith? Your secretary? What do you mean you're leaving?" Leon stood, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. "I've been having an affair with Edith for months now, and she's pregnant." The words hit me like a physical blow. I stumbled to the armchair across from him, collapsing into it. "Pregnant?" I repeated, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. "How far along?" 7 months, Leon replied, not meeting my eyes. 7 months. The realization dawned on me slowly, then all at once. "The conference in Chicago," I said, my voice hollow. "You told me you were going alone." Leon nodded, his shoulders slumping. "I'm sorry, Irma. Bliss, I never meant for this to happen, but I can't ignore my feelings anymore. I want a divorce." "A divorce?" The word echoed in the suddenly too small room. "What about Tyler? What about our family?" "Tyler's almost grown," Leon said, as if that made it all okay. "He'll understand eventually." Anger flared within me, hot and fierce. "Understand that his father is abandoning his family for a woman half his age? That you're throwing away 17 years of marriage?" Leon flinched, but stood his ground. "I know this is a shock, Irma, but Edith and we have a connection. She understands me in a way you never have." I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Oh, I'm sure she does, and I'm sure it has nothing to do with the fact that she's young and doesn't have crow's feet or stretch marks." "It's not like that," Leon protested weakly. "Then what is it like?" I demanded, rising to my feet. "Explain it to me, Leon. Help me understand how you could do this to us." Before he could answer, the front door opened. Tyler's voice called out, "Mom? Dad? Why are you both home?" Leon and I froze, staring at each other. In that moment, I saw a flicker of doubt cross Leon's face. But then he squared his shoulders and called out, "In here, son." Tyler appeared in the doorway, his backpack slung over one shoulder. His eyes darted between us, taking in the suitcase, the tension crackling in the air. "What's going on?" I opened my mouth, but no words came out. How could I tell our son that his father was leaving us? Leon stepped forward, his voice gentle. "Tyler, there's something we need to talk about. Your mother and we're going to be separating." Tyler's face crumpled. "What? Why?" I found my voice then, fierce and protective. "Your father has decided he'd rather start a new family with his secretary." "Irma," Leon warned, but I ignored him. Tyler's eyes widened in disbelief. "Dad, is that true?" Leon sighed heavily. "It's complicated, son, but yes, I'm leaving. I'm sorry." Tyler's face hardened, a look I'd never seen before settling over his features. "So you're just going to abandon us? Just like that?" "Tyler, please try to understand," Leon began, but Tyler cut him off. "Understand what? That you're a selfish jerk who doesn't care about anyone but himself?" Tyler spat, tears welling in his eyes. He turned to me, his voice breaking. "Mom?" I pulled him into my arms, holding him tight as he began to sob. Over his head, I met Leon's gaze, my own eyes blazing with a mixture of pain and determination. "You want to leave?" I said, my voice low and dangerous. "Then go. But don't think for a second that this is over. You have no idea what you've just started." The day after Leon left, I found myself sitting at my kitchen table, staring blankly at a cold cup of coffee. The house felt empty, hollow. Tyler had barely spoken a word since his father's departure, shutting himself in his room. The doorbell rang, startling me out of my daze. I opened the door to find Tessa, my best friend since college, standing there with a determined look on her face. "All right, spill it," she said, marching past me into the kitchen. "I got your cryptic text. What's this about Leon leaving?" I sank back into my chair, the weight of everything crashing down on me. "He's having an affair with his secretary, Edith. She's pregnant." Tessa's jaw dropped. "There's more," I interrupted. He wants a divorce. Tessa's eyes flashed with anger. Oh, hell no, we're not letting him get away with this. Before I could respond, there was another knock at the door. I opened it to find my mother, Lorraine, standing there with a suitcase. Mom? I said, surprised. What are you doing here? I'm here to help, of course, she said, bustling past me. A mother always knows when her child needs her. I shot Tessa a panicked look. My relationship with my mother was complicated at best, and her traditional views often clashed with my more modern outlook. Irma, dear, Lorraine said, settling herself at the kitchen table, you need to fight for your marriage. This Edith woman cannot take what's yours. I felt a flare of irritation. Mom, I don't know if fighting is the right answer, but I won't let him walk away so easily. Tessa nodded approvingly. That's right, we need a plan. A plan? Lorraine looked scandalized. The only plan you need is to win your husband back. Have you let yourself go, Irma? Maybe if you put in a little more effort. Mom, I snapped. This isn't about me letting myself go. Leon made a choice to betray our family. Tessa leaned forward, her eyes gleaming. What if we dig into this Edith character? I bet she's not as innocent as she seems. I hesitated, torn between my desire for answers and my fear of what I might find. I don't know. Nonsense. Lorraine interjected. A good wife doesn't snoop. She trusts her husband. A good husband doesn't cheat, Tessa shot back. As they argued, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Leon. We need to talk about the house. I'm coming over tomorrow. My heart raced. He's coming here tomorrow, I said, interrupting their bickering, to talk about the house. Lorraine perked up. Perfect. This is your chance to win him back. Tessa rolled her eyes. Or your chance to show him what he's losing. I stood up, suddenly feeling suffocated. I need some air, I muttered, heading for the back porch. Outside, I took deep breaths, trying to clear my head. The sound of the door opening made me turn. It was Tyler. Mom, he said, his voice small. Are you okay? I forced a smile. I'm fine, honey. Just thinking. He came to stand beside me, looking out at the yard. I heard Grandma and Tessa arguing. What are you going to do? I sighed, wrapping an arm around his shoulders. I don't know yet, but whatever happens, we'll get through it together, okay? Tyler nodded, leaning into me. I hate him for doing this to us, he whispered. His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I realized then that this wasn't just about me and Leon anymore. It was about our family, about Tyler. I know, sweetie, I said, hugging him tighter. I'm angry, too, but we can't let that anger consume us. As we stood there, I felt a resolve building within me. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but I knew one thing for certain. I wouldn't let Leon or Edith destroy what I'd spent years building. I turned back to the house, where I could still hear Tessa and my mother arguing. It was time to take control of this situation. Time to show Leon exactly what he was walking away from. And if that meant uncovering some uncomfortable truths about Edith along the way, well, so be it. The morning Leon was due to arrive, I woke early, my stomach in knots. Tessa had stayed over, camping out on the couch to offer moral support. As I made coffee, she joined me in the kitchen, her hair a mess but her eyes alert. Ready for battle? She asked, accepting a steaming mug. I nodded grimly. As I'll ever be. The doorbell rang at precisely 10 a.m. Leon always was punctual, even in the midst of destroying our family. I opened the door, steeling myself. Irma, he said, his voice softer than I expected. Can I come in? I stepped aside wordlessly, leading him to the kitchen where Tessa sat, arms crossed. Leon's eyebrows rose slightly at her presence, but he said nothing. Let's get this over with, I said, sitting down. You wanted to talk about the house? Leon cleared his throat. Yes, I think it would be best if you and Tyler stayed here. I'll find an apartment. How generous of you, Tessa muttered. I shot her a warning look before turning back to Leon. And the mortgage? The bills? I'll continue to pay my share, of course, he said. I want to make this as easy as possible for everyone. Something in me snapped. Easy? I laughed bitterly. How could you do this to our family, Leon? He flinched, guilt flashing across his face. I'm sorry, Irma. Edith's the one I want now. I can't change how I feel. And what about how Tyler feels? I demanded. Have you even thought about what this is doing to him? Leon's face crumpled. Of course I have. I love Tyler. You have a funny way of showing it, Tessa interjected. Before Leon could respond, my phone buzzed. I glanced at it, frowning at the unfamiliar number. Hello? Is this Irma Lawson? a woman's voice asked. Yes, who's this? My name is Sandra. I used to work with Edith. There's something you need to know. My heart raced. Go on. Edith has a history of, well, using men for personal gain. She's done this before at our old company. Got involved with the CEO, claimed she was pregnant. It was a whole mess. I gripped the phone tighter, aware of Leon and Tessa's curious stares. Thank you for telling me, Sandra. Can we meet? After arranging to meet Sandra later that day, I hung up, my mind reeling. What was that about? Leon asked. I looked at him, seeing him clearly for the first time in days. He looked tired, conflicted. Part of me wanted to tell him everything, to shake him and make him see how he'd been manipulated. But another part, a stronger part, wanted answers first. Nothing important, I lied smoothly. Now about the house. We hammered out the details, Leon agreeing to more than I expected. As he prepared to leave, he hesitated at the door. Irma, I am sorry. For everything. I met his gaze steadily. Sorry isn't enough, Leon, not this time. After he left, Tessa turned to me expectantly. Spill, what was that phone call really about? I told her everything Sandra had said, watching her eyes widen. Holy crap, she breathed. So Edith's a professional homewrecker? Seems like it, I said grimly. And I'm going to find out everything I can about her. Tessa grinned, a fierce light in her eyes. Count me in. Operation Takedown Edith is a go. As we began to plan, I felt a mix of emotions swirling within me. Anger at Leon's betrayal, determination to protect my family, and a growing desire for justice. Or was it revenge? One thing was certain. Edith had no idea who she was messing with. And by the time I was done, she'd regret ever laying eyes on Leon Lawson. The cafe was bustling when I arrived to meet Sandra. Tessa had insisted on coming along, her presence a comforting anchor in the storm of emotions threatening to overwhelm me. Sandra was easy to spot, a petite woman with graying hair and kind eyes. As we sat down, she leaned in, her voice low. I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, Irma, but I couldn't stand by and watch Edith destroy another family. I took a deep breath. Tell me everything. For the next hour, Sandra painted a picture of Edith that made my blood run cold. Multiple affairs, each ending with claims of pregnancy and demands for money. A trail of broken marriages and shattered lives left in her wake. She's ruthless, Sandra finished, and she always gets what she wants. I felt sick. Does she ever actually have the babies? Sandra shook her head. Never. There's always a convenient miscarriage right after she gets a big payout. Tessa's hand found mine under the table, squeezing tight. We need to tell Leon, she said, but I hesitated. Would he even believe me? Or would Edith's hold on him be too strong? As if summoned by my thoughts, my phone buzzed with a text from Leon. Need to talk? Can you meet me at the house in an hour? I showed Tessa the message, my heart racing. This is it, I said. I have to confront him with what we know. We thanked Sandra and left, my mind whirling with plans. At home, I gathered the evidence we'd collected. Bank statements showing large transfers from Leon's account to Edith's, photos of her with other married men, Sandra's sworn statement. Tessa helped me organize everything into a folder. Are you sure you want to do this alone? She asked, worry etched on her face. I nodded. I have to. This is between me and Leon. As I waited for Leon to arrive, I paced the living room, rehearsing what I'd say. But when he walked in, all my carefully prepared words evaporated. He looked haggard, his eyes red-rimmed. Irma, he said, his voice cracking. I've made a terrible mistake. For a moment, hope flared in my chest. But then he continued. Edith wants me to sell the house. She says we need the money for the baby, for our new life together. Rage surged through me. And you're actually considering it? Leon wouldn't meet my eyes. I don't know what else to do. She says if I don't, she'll leave, take the baby and disappear. I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. Oh, Leon, you poor deluded fool. His head snapped up, confusion and anger warring on his face. What's that supposed to mean? I grabbed the folder, thrusting it at him. It means you've been played. Edith is a con artist, Leon. This is what she does. Seduces married men, fakes pregnancies, bleeds them dry. Leon's face paled as he flipped through the documents. This can't be true. It is, I said, my voice steady. And deep down I think you know it. You just didn't want to see it. He sank onto the couch, his head in his hands. What have I done? He whispered. Part of me wanted to comfort him, to say we could work it out. But a stronger part, the part that had been forged in the fire of his betrayal, held firm. "You've destroyed our family," I said, "and now you have a choice to make. You can continue down this path with Edith, sell our home, and lose everything. Or you can wake up and fight back." Leon looked up at me, his eyes pleading. "What should I do?" I shook my head. "I can't make that decision for you, Leon, but I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to expose Edith for who she really is, with or without your help." As I turned to leave, Leon called out, "Irma, wait, I want to help. Tell me what to do." I paused at the door, my hand on the knob. This was it, the moment that would define everything that came after. I took a deep breath and turned back to face my husband, ready to plan our next move. The charity gala was in full swing when I arrived, my heart pounding beneath the sleek black dress I'd chosen for the occasion. Leon stood by my side, his face a mask of nervous determination. We'd agreed that confronting Edith here, in public, was our best chance of exposing her true nature. "Are you sure about this?" Leon whispered as we made our way through the crowd. I nodded, my jaw set. "It's time to end this, once and for all." We spotted Edith across the room, her pregnancy on full display in a form-fitting gown. She was chatting animatedly with a group of Leon's colleagues, her hand resting possessively on her swollen belly. As we approached, I saw the moment Edith noticed us. Her eyes widened, then narrowed, a calculating look crossing her face. "Leon, darling," she called out, her voice syrupy sweet. "I didn't expect to see you here, and—" "Irma, what a surprise." I forced a smile. "Hello, Edith. We need to talk." Edith's smile faltered for just a moment before she recovered. "Of course, dear. Why don't we step outside for a moment?" As we moved to a quieter corner of the ballroom, I could feel the tension radiating off Leon. This was it, the moment of truth. "What's this about?" Edith asked, her hand protectively cradling her belly. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "It's about your lies, Edith, all of them." Her face hardened. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, I think you do," I said, pulling out the folder of evidence. "We know about your past, Edith. The other men, the fake pregnancies, the cons." Edith's eyes darted between me and Leon, her composure cracking. "Leon, don't listen to her. She's just a bitter wife who can't the truth." But Leon stood firm. "Is it true, Edith? Have you been lying to me this whole time?" Edith's demeanor changed in an instant. Gone was the sweet, vulnerable facade. In its place was a cold, calculating woman. "So what if I have?" she spat. "You were so easy to manipulate, Leon. A few tears, a fake pregnancy test, and you were putty in my hands." I watched as the color drained from Leon's face. "The baby," he whispered. Edith laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. "Oh, there's a baby all right, but who knows if it's yours? You're not the only man I've been seeing, Leon." The admission hit us both like a physical blow. I'd suspected, of course, but hearing it confirmed was something else entirely. "You've lied about everything," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "All you care about is yourself." Edith turned to me, her eyes blazing. "And what about you, Irma? You think you're so much better? Look at you, scheming and plotting. You're no different from me." Her words struck a chord, making me question everything I'd done. Was I really any better than Edith? Had my desire for revenge turned me into someone I didn't recognize? Before I could respond, Leon stepped forward. "That's enough, Edith. It's over. Whatever game you were playing, you've lost." Edith's face contorted with rage. "You think this is over? I'll ruin you, Leon. I'll take everything you have." As she stormed off, leaving us standing there in shocked silence, I realized we'd won. But at what cost? The truth was out, but that the damage had been done. Leon turned to me, his eyes filled with remorse and confusion. "Irma, I don't know what to say. I've been such a fool." I looked at him, really looked at him for the first time in weeks. The man I'd loved for 17 years, the father of my child, stood before me, broken and humbled. Part of me wanted to comfort him, to say we could work it out, but another part, the part that had endured the pain and betrayal, held back. "What happens now?" Leon asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I took a deep breath, knowing my next words would shape our future. The easy path would be forgiveness, trying to rebuild what we'd lost. But as I stood there, I realized I had a choice to make, not just for myself, but for Tyler, for our family. "Now," I said, my voice steady, "we figure out how to move forward. But Leon, I need you to understand something. Things can never go back to the way they were." As I watched the realization dawn on Leon's face, I felt a strange mix of sadness and liberation. The confrontation with Edith had exposed more than just her lies. It had laid bare the cracks in our own relationship, the trust that had been irreparably broken. Whatever came next, I knew one thing for certain: nothing would ever be the same again. The days following the confrontation with Edith were a blur of legal meetings and tense conversations. Leon had moved back home, sleeping in the guest room while we tried to navigate our new reality. But the fragile peace we'd established was about to shatter. I was in the kitchen, mechanically stirring a pot of soup, when I heard the front door slam. Tyler stormed in, his face a mask of fury. "He's still talking to her," he spat, throwing his backpack on the floor. I saw them together at the coffee shop near school. My hand froze on the spoon. "What? Are you sure?" Tyler nodded, his eyes brimming with tears. "They were arguing. I heard him say he couldn't just abandon her, that he had responsibilities." The room spun. I gripped the counter to steady myself, bile rising in my throat. After everything we'd been through, after all the lies we'd uncovered, Leon was still torn. As if summoned by our conversation, Leon walked in, his face pale and drawn. He stopped short when he saw us, the guilt written plainly across his features. "You saw her," I said, my voice flat. It wasn't a question. Leon sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's complicated, Irma. The baby might not even be yours," I exploded, the weeks of pent-up anger and hurt finally boiling over. "How can you still be considering this?" Tyler stepped between us, his young face set in lines of determination that made him look far older than his 15 years. "You're choosing her over us?" he demanded. "Over your own family?" Leon flinched as if he'd been struck. "Tyler, no, that's not." "Then what is it, Dad?" Tyler's voice cracked. "Because from where I'm standing, that's exactly what it looks like." I watched as the reality of the situation finally seemed to dawn on Leon. He looked from Tyler to me, his eyes wide with dawning horror. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "Tyler, I didn't realize how much this was hurting you." But Tyler wasn't done. Years of bottled-up pain and resentment came pouring out. "You've barely been here for months. You missed my basketball finals, my science fair, and for what? For her?" Each word seemed to hit Leon like a physical blow. He stumbled back, collapsing onto a kitchen chair. "I've made such a mess of everything," he murmured. I wanted to comfort him, to say we could work it out, but the anger that had been simmering for weeks finally boiled over. "You don't get to play the victim here, Leon. You made your choices. Now you have to live with the consequences." Just then, Leon's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his face paling further. "It's Edith," he said. "She says if I don't come over right now, she'll get rid of the baby." The kitchen fell silent. I could see the war raging behind Leon's eyes, the pull of obligation against the love for his family. "Go," I said, my voice cold. "If that's what you really want, then go. But understand this, if you walk out that door, don't bother coming back." Tyler's head snapped up, his eyes wide. "Mom," I held up a hand, silencing him. This was between me and Leon now. Leon stood slowly, his movements heavy. He looked at Tyler, then at me, tears streaming down his face. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, "for everything." And then he was gone, the sound of the front door closing echoing through the suddenly too quiet house. Tyler turned to me, his face a mix of anger and desperation. How could he just leave like that, after everything? I pulled him into a fierce hug, feeling his body shake with sobs. "I don't know, sweetheart. I don't know." As I held my son, I felt something inside me harden. Leon had made his choice. Now it was time for me to make mine. Whatever happened next, I knew one thing for certain. I would do whatever it took to protect Tyler and rebuild our lives, with or without Leon. The sound of a car engine starting outside made Tyler stiffen in my arms. We both knew it was Leon driving away from us, towards Edith, towards the life he thought he wanted. "What do we do now?" Tyler asked, his voice muffled against my shoulder. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the battle ahead. "Now," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "We fight, for ourselves, for our family, and we don't look back." As the sound of Leon's car faded into the distance, I felt a strange mix of grief and determination wash over me. This was far from over, but for the first time in weeks, I felt ready to face whatever came next, on my own terms. The silence in the house was deafening. Tyler had retreated to his room, and I found myself pacing the living room, my mind racing. It had been hours since Leon left, and the uncertainty was eating away at me. Suddenly my phone buzzed. It was a text from Leon. "Meet me at Edith's apartment. Now." My heart raced as I called out to Tyler. "I have to go out. Stay here and lock the doors." "Mom, what's going on?" he asked, his voice laced with worry. I forced a smile. "I'm not sure, but I'll be back soon, I promise." The drive to Edith's apartment was a blur. When I arrived, I found Leon sitting on the steps, his head in his hands. He looked up as I approached, his face a mask of anguish. "Irma," he said, his voice breaking. "I've made a terrible mistake." Before I could respond, the door behind him flew open. Edith stood there, her her pregnant belly protruding beneath a tight shirt. "So, the wife finally shows up?" she sneered. "Come to beg for your husband back?" I straightened my spine, meeting her gaze. "I'm here because Leon asked me to come, nothing more." Edith laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. "Well, isn't that sweet? Too bad he's not going anywhere." "Are you Leon?" Leon stood, slowly, positioning himself between us. "That's enough, Edith. I'm done with your lies." Edith's face contorted with rage. "Lies? You want to talk about lies? How about the fact that this baby might not even be yours?" The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Leon stumbled back as if he'd been struck. "What are you talking about?" Edith's smile was cruel. "Oh, Leon, did you really think you were the only one? You were just a means to an end, a comfortable life, financial security. That's all I wanted from you." I watched as the last vestiges of Leon's delusion crumbled. He turned to me, his eyes pleading. "Irma, I don't know what to say." But Edith wasn't finished. She advanced on us, her voice rising hysterically. "You think this changes anything? I'll ruin you both. I'll take everything you have." In that moment, something inside me snapped. All the pain, the anger, the betrayal of the past months came rushing to the surface. I stepped forward, my voice low and dangerous. "No, Edith, you won't. Because if you try, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly who and what you are. Every lie, every con, every man you've manipulated. It all ends here." Edith's face paled, but her eyes blazed with defiance. "You're bluffing. You have nothing on me." I pulled out my phone, showing her the screen. "Are you sure about that? I have statements from your previous victims, bank records, even a confession from your own mother. It's over, Edith." For a moment I thought she might lunge at me, but then, like a puppet with its strings cut, she crumpled to the ground, sobbing. Leon moved towards her, but I caught his arm. "Don't," I said firmly. "She needs help, but not from you. Not anymore." As if on cue, police sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. I had called them before arriving, a precaution that now seemed prescient. Leon turned to me, his face a mix of gratitude and shame. "Irma, I'm so sorry for everything. Can we try to fix this?" I looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in months. The man I had loved, the father of my child, stood before me, broken and humbled. Part of me wanted to comfort him, to say we could work it out, but another part, the part that had endured the pain and betrayal, held firm. "I don't know, Leon," I said honestly. "Right now, I need to focus on Tyler, on healing our family. Whatever happens between us, that's going to take time." As the police cars pulled up and officers approached, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. The storm that had been raging for months was finally breaking. What came next, I didn't know, but for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to face it. On my own terms. I turned to Leon, my voice steady. "Let's go home. Tyler's waiting." As we walked away from Edith's apartment, leaving the chaos behind, I realized that this wasn't an ending, it was a beginning. A chance to rebuild, to redefine what family meant to us. And whatever the future held, I knew one thing for certain. We would face it together. Stronger for having weathered this storm. The weeks following the confrontation with Edith were a whirlwind of legal meetings, therapy sessions, and long, difficult conversations. Leon had moved back into the house, sleeping in the guest room, while we tried to navigate our new reality. But the fragile peace we'd established was about to face its ultimate test. I was in the kitchen, absently stirring a pot of coffee, when Leon walked in. His face was drawn, his eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep. "Irma," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "can we talk?" I nodded, bracing myself for whatever was coming. Leon took a deep breath. "I've been doing a lot of thinking. About us, about everything that's happened. I know I've made terrible mistakes, but I want to make things right. Please, give us another chance. I looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in months. The man I had loved for 17 years, the father of my child, stood before me, broken and humbled. Part of me wanted to say yes to try and rebuild what we'd lost, but another part, the part that had endured the pain and betrayal, held firm. "Leon," I said, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions raging inside me. "I appreciate that you want to make amends, but too much has happened. This isn't just about you and me anymore. It's about Tyler, about our family." Leon's face crumpled. "I know I've hurt Tyler. I want to make it up to him, to both of you." Just then, Tyler walked into the kitchen. He stopped short when he saw us, his eyes darting between his father and me. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice wary. I took a deep breath. "Your father and I were just talking about our future, about what's best for all of us." Tyler's jaw set in a determined line. "And what did you decide?" I looked at Leon, then back at our son. "I think it's time we all had an honest conversation about that." For the next hour we talked, really talked, in a way we hadn't in years. Tyler spoke about his anger, his feelings of abandonment. Leon listened, tears streaming down his face as he realized the full impact of his actions. And I found myself speaking truths I'd been holding back for too long. "I love you both," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "But love isn't always enough. We need trust, respect, and a shared vision for our future. And right now, I'm not sure we have that." Leon nodded, his face a mask of pain and understanding. "I know I've broken your trust, both of you, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to earn it back if you'll let me." Tyler looked at his father, then at me. "What does this mean for us, for our family?" I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. "It means we're going to move forward, but in a different way. Your father and we're going to separate, officially." The words hung in the air, heavy with finality. Tyler's eyes widened, but I saw a flicker of relief there, too. "But," I continued, reaching out to take Tyler's hand, "we're still a family, just a different kind of family. One where both your father and I can be the best versions of ourselves for you." Leon nodded, his voice choked with emotion. "Your mother's right. We both love you more than anything, Tyler. That will never change." As the reality of our decision settled over us, I felt a strange mix of sadness and liberation. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in months, it felt right. We spent the rest of the day together, not as a married couple and their son, but as three individuals finding a new way to be a family. We laughed, we cried, and we began the process of healing. That night, as I lay in bed, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here. The pain, the betrayal, the fight to reclaim my sense of self. I realized that while I hadn't emerged unscathed, I had emerged stronger. I thought about the women who had supported me through this ordeal. Tessa, with her unwavering friendship, my mother with her tough love, even Edith's mother Brenda, whose revelations had helped me see the truth. And I thought about Tyler, our beautiful, resilient son who had shown a strength beyond his years. As I drifted off to sleep, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The future was uncertain, but I was ready to face it. Not as Leon's wife, not as a victim of betrayal, but as Irma, mother, nurse, survivor. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new joys, and new opportunities for growth. And I would meet them head-on, with the knowledge that I was capable of weathering any storm. The journey wasn't over. In many ways, it was just beginning. But for the first time in a long time, I was excited to see where it would lead. I smoothed my skirt and took a deep breath, steeling myself for another one of Cecilia's impromptu visits. The doorbell chimed, and I plastered on a smile before opening the door. "Laura, thank goodness you're home." Cecilia burst in, her designer purse swinging wildly. "I'm in such a pickle, and I didn't know who else to turn to." I bit back a sigh. "What's wrong this time, Cecilia?" She collapsed dramatically onto my couch. "It's the mortgage. I'm behind again, and they're threatening foreclosure. I just need a little help to tide me over." I perched on the edge of an armchair, my patience wearing thin. "Cecilia, we've been through this before. Ethan and I can't keep bailing you out." "But your family?" she wailed. "What am I supposed to do?" Before I could respond, my cell phone rang. I glanced at the caller ID and felt a wave of relief. "I'm sorry, Cecilia, but I need to take this. It's my father." I stepped into the kitchen, grateful for the interruption. Hi, Dad. How are you feeling? Laura, sweetheart. My father's voice was uncharacteristically serious. I need you to come over. There's something important we need to discuss. A chill ran down my spine. Is everything okay? Just come as soon as you can, he said, then hung up. I returned to the living room, where Cecilia was rifling through her purse. I'm sorry, but I have to go. My father needs me. Cecilia's head snapped up. But what about my situation? We'll talk later, I said firmly, ushering her towards the door. I really have to go. As I drove to my father's house, my mind raced. What could be so urgent? Dad had always been the picture of health, but lately he'd seemed more tired than usual. I pulled into the driveway and hurried inside. Dad? Where are you? In here, Laura, he called from the study. I found him sitting behind his desk, looking older than I'd ever seen him. What's going on, Dad? You're scaring me. He gestured for me to sit. I'm afraid I have some bad news, sweetheart. I've been to see Dr. Jameson and, well, it's not good. My heart dropped. What do you mean? I have cancer, Laura, and it's advanced. They're giving me 6 months, maybe a year. The world tilted on its axis. No, I whispered. There must be some mistake. We'll get a second opinion, try different treatments. Dad reached across the desk and took my hand. I've already done all that. It's time to face facts, but that's not why I called you here. I blinked back tears. What do you mean? He pulled out a thick folder. I need to get my affairs in order, and there are some things you need to know. I've made some investments over the years, properties and such. I want to make sure you're taken care of after I'm gone. Dad, stop, I pleaded. I don't want to talk about this. We have to, Laura. You need to be prepared. As he started explaining about bank accounts and real estate holdings, my phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. Where are you? Cecilia's upset. What happened? I ignored it, trying to focus on my father's words. But my mind was reeling. How could this be happening? And how was I going to tell Ethan? Dad must have sensed my distraction. We can go over the details later. For now, just know that everything's taken care of. You won't have to worry. I nodded numbly, still struggling to process it all. As I stood to leave, Dad pulled me into a tight hug. We'll get through this, sweetheart, he murmured. Together. I clung to him, wishing I could freeze this moment and make time stand still. But as I pulled away, I knew nothing would ever be the same again. Driving home, I felt like I was in a fog. How could I face Ethan and Cecilia with this news? How could I face anyone? As I pulled into my driveway, I saw Cecilia's car still parked out front. My heart sank. I wasn't ready for this. I wasn't ready for any of it. Taking a deep breath, I stepped out of the car and walked towards the house, bracing myself for whatever came next. The day of Dad's funeral dawned gray and somber, matching my mood perfectly. I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my black dress, when Ethan appeared behind me. You ready? He asked, his hand on my shoulder. I nodded, not trusting my voice. As we drove to the church, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. The service was a blur of tears and whispered condolences. I barely registered the words of the eulogy, focusing instead on the framed photo of Dad next to his casket. He looked so alive, so vibrant. How could he be gone? As we gathered at the cemetery, Cecilia sidled up to me. Laura, I'm so sorry for your loss, she said, her voice dripping with sympathy. Your father was such a generous man. I'm sure he made sure you were well taken care of. I stiffened, shocked by her brazenness. Before I could respond, Ethan pulled me away. Not now, he muttered. Back at the house, I retreated to Dad's study, needing a moment alone. I ran my fingers over his desk, remembering our last conversation. The folder he'd shown me was still there, tucked away in a drawer. A knock at the door startled me. It was Mr. Jameson, Dad's lawyer. Laura, I'm sorry to disturb you, but there are some matters we need to discuss, he said gently. I nodded, gesturing for him to sit. What is it? He pulled out a thick envelope. Your father's will. He was very specific about his wishes. As Mr. Jameson began reading, I felt a mix of emotions wash over me. Dad had left me everything. The house, his savings, even a few properties I didn't know he owned. There's one more thing, Mr. Jameson said, handing me a sealed letter. Your father wanted you to have this privately. I took it with trembling hands, but before I could open it, the door burst open. Ethan and Cecilia stood there, their eyes wide. What's going on? Ethan demanded. Mr. Jameson stood. I was just going over Harold's will with Laura, if you'll excuse us. No, Cecilia interrupted. We're family. We should hear this too. I felt a surge of anger. This is private, Cecilia. Please leave. Ethan stepped forward. Laura, don't you think we should discuss this as a family? After all, what affects you affects me too. I stared at him, suddenly seeing him in a new light. What exactly are you implying, Ethan? Before he could answer, Cecilia chimed in. We're just concerned, Laura. You've been through so much. You shouldn't have to deal with all this alone. I stood up, clutching Dad's letter to my chest. I'm not alone. I have my father's memory and his wishes to guide me. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need some time to myself. I brushed past them, ignoring their protests. In the sanctuary of my bedroom, I finally opened Dad's letter with shaking hands. My dearest Laura, it began. If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. But I want you to know that I've made arrangements to protect you and your inheritance. Trust your instincts, sweetheart. Not everyone has your best interests at heart. Tears blurred my vision as I read on. Dad had suspected that Ethan and Cecilia might try to take advantage of the situation. He'd set up trusts and legal safeguards to ensure that his legacy remained mine alone. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Laura? It was Ethan. We need to talk about the will. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the conversation ahead. As I reached for the doorknob, I realized that the battle for my father's legacy and my own future was just beginning. Coming, I called out, tucking the letter safely away. Whatever happened next, I knew I had to stay strong, for Dad and for myself. The incessant ringing of the doorbell jolted me awake. I glanced at the clock. 7:30 a.m.? Who could it be at this hour? Ethan was already gone, having left early for a business meeting. I threw on a robe and hurried downstairs, only to find Cecilia on my doorstep, looking frazzled. Laura, thank goodness you're home, she exclaimed, barging past me. I'm in dire straits. The bank is threatening to repossess my car. I sighed, closing the door. Cecilia, it's barely morning. Couldn't this wait? She whirled around, eyes wide. Wait, Laura, I could lose my car today. I need your help. Just a small loan to tide me over. The audacity of her request so soon after Dad's funeral made my blood boil. Cecilia, I'm still grieving. I can't deal with your financial problems right now. But you have all that money now, she pressed. Surely you can spare some for family? I felt a surge of anger. That's enough. My inheritance is not your personal piggy bank. I think you should leave. Cecilia's face hardened. I see how it is. You get a windfall and suddenly you're too good for family. Ethan will hear about this. As I watched her storm out, I realized the peace I'd hoped for after Dad's passing was slipping further away. Later that afternoon, as I sorted through Dad's belongings, my phone buzzed. It was an email from my old high school announcing an upcoming reunion. I hesitated, then decided to RSVP. Maybe a night out would do me good. Just then, Ethan walked in, looking tired. Hey, he said, kissing my cheek. How was your day? I debated whether to mention Cecilia's visit, but decided against it. Fine, just going through some of Dad's things. How was your meeting? He shrugged, loosening his tie. Same old, same old. Listen, I was thinking we should talk about the inheritance. Maybe consider investing some of it. I felt my guard go up. I'm not ready to make any decisions yet, Ethan. It's too soon. He frowned. Laura, we can't just sit on that kind of money. We need to be smart about this. I echoed. Dad left it to me, Ethan. I'll decide what to do with it when I'm ready. The tension in the room was palpable. Ethan opened his mouth to argue, but his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then back at me. We'll discuss this later. I have to take this call. As he hurried out, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Why was he so interested in my inheritance? The next morning, I woke to find Ethan already gone again. There was a note on the kitchen counter. Early meeting. Don't wait up tonight. Feeling restless, I decided to visit one of the properties Dad had left me, a small apartment building across town. As I pulled up, I noticed a familiar car parked outside. Cecilia's. Confused, I made my way to the building's office. The door was ajar, and I could hear voices inside. She's being so stubborn, Cecilia was saying. We need to find a way to convince her to share the inheritance. Patience, a male voice replied. It took me a moment to recognize it as Ethan's. We'll get what's ours. Just stick to the plan. I stumbled backward, my mind reeling. Ethan and Cecilia were plotting against me? How long had this been going on? As I turned to leave, my foot caught on a loose floorboard. The resulting creak seemed to echo through the hallway. Did you hear that? Cecilia's voice was sharp with alarm. I held my breath, pressing myself against the wall. Footsteps approached the door. Hello? Ethan called out. Is someone there? My heart pounding, I realized I had a choice to make. Confront them now, or retreat and plan my next move carefully. Either way, I knew one thing for certain. Nothing would ever be the same again. I smoothed my dress nervously as I entered the high school gymnasium. The reunion was in full swing, a sea of familiar yet changed faces. I'd come here hoping for a distraction from the mess at home, but now I felt overwhelmed. Laura? Laura Thompson, is that you? I turned to see a vaguely familiar face. It's Laura Prescott now, but yes, I'm sorry, I don't. Peter Caldwell, he said, grinning widely. We had chemistry together. Well, the class, not, you know. I forced a polite smile, memories flooding back. Peter had always been a bit intense. Of course, Peter. How are you? Oh, I'm great, he said, edging closer. But wow, look at you. You haven't aged a day. I took a step back, feeling uncomfortable. That's kind of you to say. If you'll excuse me, I need to. Wait, Peter said, grabbing my arm. I've always regretted not telling you how I felt back then. I had such a crush on you, Laura. I gently but firmly removed his hand. Peter, that was a long time ago. I'm married now. His eyes narrowed. Married? To who? Ethan Prescott, I said, scanning the room for an escape route. Peter's face darkened. Prescott? As in Cecilia Prescott's brother? I froze. You know Cecilia? He laughed bitterly. Oh, I know her all right. She's been stringing me along for months, always needing favors, but now I see what's really going on. My heart raced. What do you mean? Peter leaned in, his breath hot on my ear. Your husband and his sister are planning something, Laura, and it involves you. I stumbled back, my mind reeling. You're lying. Why should I believe you? Because I can prove it, he said, pulling out his phone. Cecilia's been careless, left some interesting texts on my phone when she borrowed it. With shaking hands, I took the phone. What I saw made my blood run cold. Messages between Cecilia and Ethan discussing ways to access my inheritance, plans to manipulate me to push me to make rash decisions. This can't be real, I whispered. Peter's eyes gleamed with a mix of sympathy and something else. Excitement? Oh, it's real, all right. And there's more where that came from. I handed the phone back, feeling sick. Why are you showing me this? He shrugged. Maybe I still have a soft spot for you, or maybe I'm just tired of being Cecilia's puppet. Either way, you deserve to know. I nodded numbly, my mind racing. What was I going to do with this information? Peter touched my arm again. Listen, Laura, I can help you. We could team up, get back at them both. What do you say? I stared at him, suddenly seeing the situation clearly. Peter wasn't my savior, he was just another player in this twisted game, but he had given me valuable information, whether he meant to or not. Thank you for telling me, Peter, I said carefully, but I need to handle this on my own. His face fell. But Laura. No, I said firmly, this is my fight. Please don't contact me again. As I walked away, my phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. Where are you? We need to talk about the inheritance. It's important. I took a deep breath, making a decision. It was time to stop reacting and start taking control. I would play along for now, gather more evidence. And then, when the time was right, I would confront them all. I texted back, on my way home. You're right. We have a lot to discuss. As I left the reunion, I felt a strange mix of dread and determination. The game had changed, and now I knew the rules. It was time to start playing to win. I stepped out of my office building, exhausted after a long day of work. As I fumbled for my car keys, a familiar voice made me freeze. Laura, fancy seeing you here. I turned slowly, my heart sinking. Peter stood there, grinning as if we were old friends. Peter, what are you doing here? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He shrugged, stepping closer. I was in the neighborhood, thought I'd say hi. How did you know where I work? I demanded, alarm bells ringing in my head. Oh, I have my ways, he said with a wink. Listen, I've been thinking about our conversation at the reunion. I really think we should talk more about Ethan and Cecilia. I backed away, clutching my purse tightly. I told you, I'm handling it myself. Please leave me alone. His face darkened. You're making a mistake, Laura. You need me. Before I could respond, a coworker walked by, giving us a curious look. I forced a smile and turned back to Peter. I have to go, don't come here again. As I drove home, my mind raced. How had Peter found me, and what would he do next? The next morning, I woke to find Ethan already gone. There was a note on the kitchen counter. Early meeting. Don't wait up tonight. I sighed, realizing how common these early meetings had become. As I sipped my coffee, movement outside caught my eye. I peered through the window and nearly dropped my mug. Peter was standing across the street, staring at our house. My hands shaking, I called Ethan. It went straight to voicemail. "Ethan, call me as soon as you get this. It's urgent." I paced the living room, debating what to do. Should I call the police? But what would I say? That my husband's sister's ex-boyfriend was stalking me because of some convoluted inheritance scheme? A knock at the door made me jump. I approached cautiously, relief washing over me when I saw it was just the mailman. But as I opened the door, Peter appeared behind him. "Special delivery," Peter said with a smirk, pushing past me into the house. "Get out," I shouted, reaching for my phone. "I'm calling the police." Peter held up his hands. "Wait, I have proof of what Ethan and Cecilia are planning. Real proof this time." Despite my better judgment, I hesitated. "What are you talking about?" He pulled out a USB drive. "Everything's on here. Bank statements, emails, recorded conversations. They're planning to have you declared mentally unfit, Laura, to take control of your inheritance." I felt the blood drain from my face. "That's impossible. Ethan wouldn't." "See for yourself," Peter said, offering me the drive. My hand trembled as I reached for it. Just then, I heard a key in the lock. Ethan's voice called out, "Laura, whose car is that out front?" Peter's eyes widened. He shoved the USB drive into my hand and bolted for the back door. I quickly slipped the drive into my pocket as Ethan entered. "Laura, what's going on?" Ethan asked, looking around suspiciously. I took a deep breath, making a split-second decision. "Nothing, honey. Just got a bit of a fright from a door-to-door salesman. Everything's fine." Ethan relaxed slightly, but I could see doubt in his eyes. "All right. Listen, I was thinking we should have dinner with Cecilia tonight to discuss some family matters." I nodded, my mind racing. "Sure, that sounds great." As Ethan headed upstairs to change, I clutched the USB drive in my pocket. I had a choice to make. Trust Peter's evidence and confront Ethan and Cecilia? Or play along and try to uncover the truth myself? One thing was certain, tonight's dinner would change everything. And I had to be ready. The doorbell rang, and I took a deep breath, steeling myself. Cecilia's visit was no surprise. Ethan had arranged this family dinner after all. But the tension in the air was palpable as I opened the door. "Laura, darling," Cecilia exclaimed, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. She breezed past me, Ethan following close behind. As we settled in the living room, I couldn't help but notice the furtive glances Ethan and Cecilia exchanged. My hand instinctively went to my pocket, feeling the outline of the USB drive Peter had given me. "So, Laura," Cecilia began, her voice sickly sweet, "how have you been coping? It must be so difficult, dealing with your grief and all this newfound responsibility." I forced a smile. "I'm managing, thank you. Dad prepared me well." Ethan cleared his throat. "Speaking of which, Laura, we really need to discuss the inheritance. I've been thinking." "Actually," I interrupted, my heart racing, "I have something I'd like to discuss first." They both stared at me, surprise evident on their faces. I took a deep breath and pulled out my phone, bringing up the photos Peter had sent me. Pictures of Ethan and Cecilia meeting in secret, looking far too cozy. "Care to explain these?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. The color drained from Ethan's face. Cecilia let out a nervous laugh. "Oh, those? That's nothing, just a family meeting." "Stop lying," I snapped. "I know what you've been planning, trying to have me declared mentally unfit? Really?" Ethan stood up, his face a mask of anger. "Where did you get those photos? Have you been spying on us?" "That's rich, coming from you," I retorted. "I'm not the one plotting behind my spouse's back." Cecilia's demeanor changed in an instant. "You ungrateful bitch," she hissed. "After everything we've done for you." "Everything you've done?" I laughed bitterly. "You mean constantly begging for money? Trying to manipulate me out of my inheritance?" Ethan stepped forward, his eyes blazing. "You have no idea what you're talking about. We were trying to protect you, to make sure you didn't squander everything your father left you." "By having me declared incompetent?" I shot back. "Some protection." Suddenly Ethan's expression shifted. A slow, cruel smile spread across his face. "You want to play hardball, Laura? Fine, let's talk about your little rendezvous with Peter." My blood ran cold. "What?" He pulled out his phone, showing me a series of photos. Peter and me at the reunion, outside my office, even at our front door. Looks like I'm not the only one with secrets, Ethan sneered. That's not what it looks like, I stammered. Peter's been stalking me. I was trying to handle it on my own. Save it, Cecilia interjected. We have all the evidence we need. How do you think it'll look to a judge when we show them these? A grieving widow, acting erratically, meeting strange men. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. They'd set me up. Peter, the photos, the USB drive, it was all part of their plan. You won't get away with this, I said, my voice shaking. Ethan's laugh was cold. We already have. Face it, Laura. You're out of your depth. Sign over control of the inheritance now, and we can avoid a messy public legal battle. I looked between them. These people I'd once considered family, now revealed as vultures circling their prey. In that moment, I felt more alone than ever. But then I remembered my father's words from his letter. Trust your instincts, sweetheart. Not everyone has your best interests at heart. I straightened my spine, meeting their gazes head-on. You're right about one thing, I said quietly. This ends now, but not the way you think. I pulled out the USB drive, holding it up. You're not the only ones with evidence, and unlike your fabricated photos, what's on here is real. So here's what's going to happen. As I laid out my terms, I saw the confidence drain from their faces. The game had changed, and for the first time I held all the cards. The battle for my father's legacy and my own future had reached its tipping point, and I was ready to fight. The morning after my confrontation with Ethan and Cecilia, I woke to an empty house and a text message from an unknown number. Meet me at Riverside Park, 1 p.m. Come alone, Peter. My instincts screamed danger, but I knew I needed answers. I arrived at the park early, scanning the area for any sign of Ethan or Cecilia. Peter was already there, pacing nervously by the fountain. Laura, he called out, relief evident in his voice. I wasn't sure you'd come. I kept my distance, eyeing him warily. Start talking, Peter. What's your role in all this? He ran a hand through his hair, looking genuinely distressed. I'm so sorry, Laura. I never meant for it to go this far. Cecilia, she blackmailed me. Said she'd ruin me if I didn't help set you up. Why should I believe you? I demanded. Peter pulled out his phone. Because I recorded everything, every conversation, every plan they made. I couldn't go through with it anymore. As he played the recordings, my world tilted on its axis. Ethan's voice, cold and calculating, discussing ways to manipulate me. Cecilia, gleefully planning how they'd spend my inheritance once I was out of the picture. Oh God, I whispered, feeling sick. How long has this been going on? Months, Peter admitted. Since before your father passed. They've been planning this for a long time, Laura. I sank onto a nearby bench, my mind reeling. Why come clean now? Peter sat beside me, keeping a respectful distance, because I realized how wrong it was, and because I really did have feelings for you back in school. I couldn't be part of destroying your life. Just then, my phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. Where are you? We need to talk. Come home now. I showed Peter the message, my heart racing. What do I do? He hesitated, then said, Go, act like nothing's changed. I'll send you copies of everything I have. Use it to protect yourself. I nodded, standing on shaky legs. Thank you, Peter. I'm sorry I misjudged you. As I drove home, my mind was a whirlwind of emotions, betrayal, anger, fear, but underneath it all, a steely determination was forming. I wouldn't be their victim any longer. Ethan was waiting when I walked in, his face a mask of concern. Where have you been? I've been worried sick. I forced a smile. Just needed some air to clear my head after last night. He nodded, reaching for my hand. I fought the urge to recoil. I'm sorry about how things went. We all said things we didn't mean. But I think I have a solution. Oh, I asked, keeping my voice neutral. Ethan led me to the dining room where Cecilia was waiting with a stack of papers. My stomach dropped. We've drawn up some documents, Ethan explained, just to help manage the inheritance. For your own protection, of course. I glanced at the papers, recognizing power of attorney forms. They were really going through with it. I don't know, I said, feigning uncertainty. This is a big decision. Can I have some time to think about it? Cecilia's smile was razor sharp. Of course, dear, but don't take too long. We wouldn't want things to get messy. As they talked, outlining their plans for my father's legacy, I felt a calm settle over me. They thought they had won, but they had no idea what was coming. My phone buzzed quietly. Peter's files had arrived. I excused myself, retreating to the bathroom. As I scrolled through the damning evidence, a plan began to form. I looked at myself in the mirror, seeing a strength I hadn't known I possessed. "Game on," I whispered to my reflection. Returning to the dining room, I plastered on a smile. "All right," I said, picking up the pen. "Let's talk about these documents." Ethan and Cecilia exchanged triumphant glances, unaware that their carefully laid plans were about to come crashing down around them. The final act was about to begin, and I was ready to reclaim my life and my father's legacy, once and for all. I stood in the living room of Ethan's parents' house, my heart pounding but my resolve unshakable. Around me, the faces of the Prescott family, including Ethan and Cecilia, ranged from confused to suspicious. "Laura, dear," Ethan's mother began, "what's this all about? Why have you called us all here?" I took a deep breath. "I have something important to share with all of you, something that will change everything." Ethan stepped forward, his eyes narrowing. "Laura, whatever you're thinking—" "No," I cut him off firmly. "You've done enough talking. Now it's my turn." I pulled out my tablet and connected it to the TV. "What you're about to see and hear might shock you, but I assure you, it's all true." As I played the recordings Peter had given me, the room fell into stunned silence. Ethan and Cecilia's voices filled the air, detailing their plans to manipulate me, to steal my inheritance, to have me declared incompetent. Ethan's father stood up, his face red with anger. "What is the meaning of this?" "It means," I said, my voice steady, "that your son and daughter have been plotting against me since before my father died. They've lied, cheated, and manipulated everyone in this room." Cecilia lunged forward. "You bitch! You have no proof." "I have every proof," I interrupted, pulling out a stack of documents. "Bank statements showing mysterious transfers, emails detailing your plans, even a recorded confession from Peter about how you blackmailed him into helping you." The room erupted into chaos. Ethan's mother was sobbing, his father shouting. Cecilia was screaming denials, while Ethan stood frozen, his face ashen. I raised my voice above the din. "I'm not finished. There's more." I played the final recording, a conversation between Ethan and his mistress, planning their future with my money. The silence that followed was deafening. Ethan's father turned to him, his voice shaking with rage. "Is this true? Have you brought this disgrace upon our family?" Ethan's shoulders slumped in defeat. "Dad, I can explain." "Get out," his father growled. "Both of you. You're no longer welcome in this family." As Ethan and Cecilia were ushered out, hurling accusations and threats, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. It was over. Ethan's mother approached me, tears in her eyes. "Laura, I'm so sorry. We had no idea." I squeezed her hand gently. "I know. You're victims in this too." As I prepared to leave, Ethan's father stopped me. "What will you do now?" I smiled, feeling truly free for the first time in months. "I'm going to honor my father's legacy, the way he would have wanted." Driving home, I reflected on the whirlwind of events that had led to this moment. The betrayal, the pain, the fear, but also the strength I'd found within myself. I pulled into my driveway, noticing a familiar figure waiting on the porch. "Peter." "I heard what happened," he said as I approached. "Are you okay?" I nodded, feeling a sense of peace wash over me. "I am. Thank you for your help, Peter. I couldn't have done this without you." He shifted awkwardly. "Laura, I know I messed up before, but I was wondering." I held up a hand, stopping him. "Peter, I appreciate everything you've done, but right now I need to focus on myself, on healing." Understanding dawned in his eyes. He nodded, offering a small smile. "Of course. Take care of yourself, Laura." As I watched him walk away, I felt the last pieces of my old life falling away. I entered the house, my house now truly mine, and looked around. The rooms that had once felt suffocating now held promise. I picked up a framed photo of my father, tracing his smiling face. "I did it, Dad," I whispered. "I protected what you built, and I found myself along the way." Setting the photo down, I walked to the window and looked out at the setting sun. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as new opportunities, but for the first time in a long time, I was ready to face them. Not as a victim, not as someone's wife or daughter, but as Laura, strong, resilient, and finally truly free. I pulled up to the house I had called home for over 30 years, and my heart sank. The familiar colonial-style facade was gone, replaced by sleek modern lines and a fresh coat of gray paint. A massive for sale sign stood defiantly on the perfectly manicured lawn. "Dennis, what's going on? I didn't authorize this!" I exclaimed as he emerged from the front door, his expression a mixture of guilt and defiance. "Relax, Maggie. You should have been here. Now it's out of our hands," he replied dismissively, waving a hand towards the renovated property. My mind raced, trying to process the jarring changes. This was my family's home, filled with memories and history. How could he make such drastic decisions without consulting me? As I stepped inside, the gut punch intensified. Gone were the warm, familiar tones and furnishings I had carefully curated over the years. In their place, a stark, minimalist design that felt cold and unwelcoming. "Mom's been a godsend overseeing the whole project," Dennis said, his tone almost mocking. "She knows what's best for us." There she was, my mother-in-law Joan, surveying the transformed space with a self-satisfied smirk. "It was time for an update, Maggie. This place was stuck in the past, just like you." Her words stung, but I bit my tongue. After months of caring for my ailing parents, I didn't have the energy for another battle with Joan's passive-aggressive jabs. "Where are my things?" I asked, dreading the answer. "We had to make room for the new look," Joan replied dismissively. "Don't worry, we kept a few sentimental pieces in storage." Storage? My stomach churned at the thought of my cherished belongings, collected over a lifetime, carelessly packed away. As I wandered through the hollow, unfamiliar rooms, an overwhelming sense of betrayal washed over me. This was no longer my home. It was a staged set, stripped of warmth and soul. In the kitchen, I found Dennis poring over paperwork with a young, attractive woman I didn't recognize. They looked up, their expressions a mixture of surprise and guilt. "Maggie, you're back early," Dennis stammered. "This is Sarah, our realtor. She's been invaluable in getting the house ready for market." Sarah extended a perfectly manicured hand, her smile saccharine sweet. "It's so nice to finally meet you, Margaret. Dennis has told me so much about you." I forced a tight smile, my mind reeling. Ready for market? They were selling my family's home without my consent? As Sarah droned on about staging and curb appeal, I tuned her out, my gaze fixed on Dennis. His eyes averted mine, and in that moment, I realized the depth of his deception. This wasn't just about the house. It was a calculated betrayal, orchestrated by Dennis and enabled by his ever-controlling mother. A cold, sinking feeling gripped me as I recognized the true extent of how little they valued my input or respected my place in this family. I had been naive, blind to the cracks forming in the foundation of my life. But now, the veil had been lifted, and I saw the harsh reality staring back at me. This was no longer my home. It was a battlefield, and I would have to fight to reclaim what was rightfully mine. I sat numbly on the edge of the bed in the guest room, my mind replaying the events of the day like a broken record. How could Dennis do this to me, to us? After 30 years of marriage, of building a life together, he had thrown it all away without a second thought. As the shock began to subside, a familiar ache settled in my chest, the dull ache of disappointment I had grown accustomed to over the years. I should have seen the signs, the subtle shifts in his behavior that I had chosen to ignore, desperate to cling to the illusion of the perfect family. Dennis had always been distant, more focused on his work and hobbies than on cultivating our relationship. But I had foolishly believed that was just his way, that deep down he still loved and cherished me. Now the truth was laid bare. I had simply been a convenient accessory in his life, easily discarded when something shinier came along. And Joan, my own mother-in-law, the woman who should have been my closest ally, had been the architect of this betrayal all along. Her constant belittling, her snide remarks about my capabilities as a wife and mother, they had all been carefully calculated jabs, chipping away at my self-worth until I was too broken to fight back. Tears stung my eyes as I remembered the countless times I had defended her to my own family, making excuses for her behavior. She's just old-fashioned, I would say. She means well, deep down. But the truth was, Joan had never accepted me as part of her family. To her, I was an interloper, a threat to the twisted, codependent bond she shared with her son. The sound of laughter from downstairs snapped me back to reality. Dennis and Joan, celebrating their victory over me, no doubt reveling in the spoils of their deception. My fists clenched involuntarily, a surge of anger replacing the sadness that had consumed me moments before. I thought of my parents, the way their faces had lit up when Dennis and I had first brought them to this house, our forever home. They had trusted him, believed in the life we were building together, and now their legacy, the home they had gifted us out of love, was being sold off like a piece of merchandise, all for Dennis's selfish gain. A renewed sense of determination washed over me. I would not let them win. Not this time. Rising from the bed, I began to gather my things, my mind already formulating a plan. First, I needed evidence, proof of Dennis's misdeeds that not even Joan could deny or spin in her favor. Then, I would rally my troops, the friends and family who had stood by me through thick and thin, the ones who had always seen through Joan's false pretenses. This was war, and I would fight with everything I had to reclaim what was rightfully mine, my home, my dignity, my life. Dennis and Joan had made the mistake of underestimating me, of believing I would simply roll over and accept their betrayal. Well, they were in for a rude awakening. As I zipped up my suitcase, a small, defiant smile tugged at the corners of my mouth. The battle lines had been drawn, and I was ready to show them just how strong I could be when pushed to my limits. This was only the beginning. I stared at the suitcase on the bed, my mind racing with 1,000 thoughts and emotions. Part of me wanted nothing more than to flee, to put as much distance as possible between myself and the toxic web of lies that had ensnared my life. But another part, the part that had been beaten down and gaslit for years, hesitated. Could I really just walk away from everything I had built? A familiar voice in the back of my mind whispered insidiously, "This is your fault, Maggie. If you had been a better wife, a better daughter-in-law, none of this would have happened." I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to drown out the voice that sounded eerily like Joan's. That wretched woman had spent decades chipping away at my self-worth, always quick with a backhanded compliment or subtle jab about my shortcomings. And Dennis, my so-called partner, had stood idly by, letting her toxic influence fester until it had poisoned our entire relationship. Flashes of memory assaulted me, moments I had tried so hard to forget. Joan criticizing my cooking at family dinners, her thin lips curled in a perpetual sneer. Dennis brushing off my concerns about her behavior, insisting I was overreacting, the way she had swooped in like a vulture when my parents fell ill, insinuating that I was an ungrateful daughter for needing to care for them. "If you cared enough about your own family, you wouldn't leave for months, Maggie," she had said, her voice dripping with false concern. At the time I had bitten my tongue, too overwhelmed by the situation to stand up for myself. But now the memory ignited a spark of defiance deep within me. How dare she question my devotion to my family when she had spent years actively undermining and sabotaging my relationships? I thought of my parents, their faces etched with worry as I had left to tend to their recovery. They had trusted Dennis, believed that he would support me through that difficult time. Little did they know, he had used my absence as an opportunity to further his own selfish agenda, aided and abetted by his manipulative mother. A renewed sense of determination washed over me. I would not let them win. Not this time. If Dennis and Joan wanted a war, then a war they would get. Zipping up the suitcase with a decisive tug, I squared my shoulders and headed for the door. There would be no more running, no more hiding. It was time to gather my troops and fight for what was rightfully mine. My home, my family, my life. As I descended the stairs, I could hear Joan's shrill voice echoing from the kitchen, no doubt berating Dennis for his latest failure. A small, grim smile tugged at the corners of my mouth. They had no idea what was coming. I paused at the bottom of the stairs, taking a deep breath to steady myself. Then, with a newfound sense of purpose, I strode towards the kitchen, ready to face my adversaries head-on. No more Mrs. Nice Maggie. It was time to take back control of my life, no matter what it took. I strode into the kitchen, my heart pounding with a mixture of rage and determination. There they were, Dennis and Joan, seated at the table like a pair of co-conspirators, their expressions a blend of smugness and disdain. Well, if it isn't the prodigal daughter-in-law," Joan sneered, her thin lips curling into a familiar sneer, "to what do we owe the pleasure of your presence?" Before I could respond, Dennis cut in, his voice dripping with condescension. "You have no idea what we've been through, managing everything you abandoned. He gestured broadly at the newly renovated space around us. We had to take matters into our own hands. I felt my hands ball into fists at my sides as I surveyed the changes they had made to my home. Our home. Gone were the warm, inviting tones and cherished family heirlooms I had carefully curated over the years. In their place, a cold, sterile aesthetic that felt utterly devoid of personality or sentiment. "Where are my things?" I demanded, fighting to keep my voice steady. Joan waved a dismissive hand. "We need to move on, Maggie. This house isn't yours to hold us back any longer." Her words hit me like a physical blow, and in that moment the full weight of their betrayal crashed over me like a tidal wave. They had not only disrespected me, but they had desecrated the very legacy my parents had entrusted to us, the home they had gifted us out of love and trust. Rage bubbled up from deep within me, a primal, visceral fury that I had never experienced before. How dare they? How dare they trample on everything that was sacred, everything that had once been so precious to our family? "You had no right," I seethed, my voice trembling with barely contained anger. "This was never just your decision to make." Dennis scoffed, leaning back in his chair with an infuriating air of nonchalance. "Don't be so dramatic, Maggie. It's just a house. We're doing what's best for our future." "Our future?" I echoed incredulously. "Or yours, Dennis? Yours and that little tramp you've been sneaking around with?" His eyes widened, and for a brief moment I saw a flicker of fear cross his features. Joan, however, remained unmoved, her expression hardening into a mask of cold indifference. "So you figured it out," she said coolly. "I must say I'm surprised it took you this long. You were always a bit slow on the uptake, weren't you, dear?" Her words were like a slap in the face, but I refused to let her see how deeply they stung. Instead, I straightened my shoulders and met her icy gaze head-on. "It's time you realized, Maggie, that you were never truly part of this family," she continued, her voice laced with venom. "You were always an outsider, a mere accessory to be tolerated for Dennis's sake." In that moment, everything became crystal clear. The years of subtle jabs and undermining, the way they had so easily cast me aside the moment I became an inconvenience, it had all been part of their twisted game, a slow, methodical erosion of my sense of self-worth and belonging. But no more. I would not be their victim, their punching bag, any longer. "You're wrong, Joan," I said, my voice steady and resolute. "This family, this legacy, it's mine just as much as it is yours, and I'll be damned if I let you destroy it for your own selfish gains." Dennis opened his mouth to protest, but I held up a hand, silencing him with a single withering glare. "Don't bother, Dennis. The lies end here. I know everything. About your affair, about the way you've been squandering my inheritance to fund your mistress's little business ventures. It's all going to come out, one way or another." For the first time, I saw a flicker of fear in Joan's eyes, a crack in her carefully constructed facade of indifference. She knew, deep down, that I had finally found the strength to fight back, and that terrified her more than anything. A small, triumphant smile tugged at the corners of my mouth. The battle lines had been drawn, and for once I held the upper hand. This was only the beginning of their reckoning. The smug looks on Dennis and Joan's faces quickly faded as the weight of my words sank in. I could see the fear flickering in their eyes, the realization that I was no longer the meek, compliant woman they had grown accustomed to controlling. How did you find out?" Dennis sputtered, his bravado crumbling under the intensity of my gaze. "Did you really think you could keep it all a secret forever?" I scoffed. "The shady financial dealings, the late nights at the office, it was only a matter of time before the truth came out." Joan's expression hardened, her lips pressing into a thin, disapproving line. "So you've been snooping through our affairs, have you? How typical of you, Maggie, to resort to such underhanded tactics." I leveled my gaze at her, refusing to be cowed by her condescending tone. "Don't try to play the victim here, Joan. You're just as guilty as Dennis in all of this." Turning to my husband, I felt a surge of disgust and betrayal rise up within me. "How could you do this to me, Dennis? To our family? After everything we've been through together, how could you throw it all away for her?" The words tumbled out before I could stop them, the hurt and anger I had bottled up for so long finally spilling over. Was I not enough for you? Did our marriage, our vows mean nothing to you? Dennis opened his mouth, but I held up a hand, silencing him. No, don't bother trying to explain it away. I know all about your little fling with Sarah, the real estate agent you've been using to funnel my inheritance into her business ventures. Joan's eyes widened, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of genuine surprise cross her features. Clearly, even she hadn't been privy to the full extent of Dennis's deception. That's right, I continued, my voice growing stronger with each word. I know about the shady deals, the secret accounts, all of it. And I have proof. Reaching into my bag, I pulled out a thick manila envelope stuffed with financial records, copies of incriminating emails, and other damning evidence I had painstakingly gathered over the past few weeks. You see, while you two were busy plotting behind my back, I was doing a little digging of my own. And what I found was a web of lies and betrayal that goes deeper than I ever could have imagined. Dennis's face had drained of color, his eyes darting nervously between me and the envelope in my hands. Joan, however, remained stubbornly defiant, her chin jutting out in a show of false bravado. So what? She sneered. You have a few pieces of paper. That doesn't change the fact that you were never truly part of this family, Maggie. You were always an outsider, a mere accessory to be tolerated for Dennis's sake. Her words cut deep, but I refused to let her see how much they stung. Instead, I met her gaze head-on, my resolve unwavering. You're wrong, Joan, I said, my voice steady and resolute. This family, this legacy, it's mine just as much as it is yours, and I'll be damned if I let you destroy it for your own selfish gains. A heavy silence hung in the air, the weight of my words settling over us like a thick fog. For a moment it seemed as though time itself had frozen, the three of us locked in a silent battle of wills. Then, without warning, Joan's composure cracked. Her face contorted into a mask of rage, and she slammed her fist down on the table with surprising force. How dare you? She spat, her voice trembling with barely contained fury. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? With accusations and threats? I held her gaze, unflinching. I'm not threatening anyone, Joan. I'm simply stating the facts. And the fact is, you and Dennis have betrayed me in the worst possible way. But it ends here, today. No more lies, no more secrets. Turning to Dennis, I felt a pang of sadness mixed with resolve. I loved you, Dennis. Truly, I did. But this... I gestured around the cold, sterile room that had once been our warm, inviting home. This is too much. You've crossed a line that can never be uncrossed. His eyes pleaded with me, silently begging for forgiveness, but I had made up my mind. There was no going back, not after everything that had happened. It's over, I said, my voice heavy with finality. The life we had, the dreams we shared, it's all gone, Dennis, and you have no one to blame but yourself. With those words, I turned and walked away, leaving them to stew in the wreckage of their own making. It was time to start anew, to rebuild my life on my own terms, without the constant weight of their manipulation and betrayal holding me back. As I stepped out into the crisp evening air, a sense of liberation washed over me. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but for the first time in years, I felt truly free, and I would savor every moment of it. The weight of Dennis and Joan's betrayal hung heavy on my shoulders as I left the house that had once been my home. But even in the depths of my anger and hurt, a newfound sense of determination burned within me. I would not let them break me, not after everything they had put me through. My first stop was the storage unit where Joan had so carelessly stashed away my belongings. As I rifled through the haphazardly packed boxes, a wave of emotion washed over me. These weren't just material possessions. They were pieces of my life, memories and mementos that had been so callously discarded. Gently, I lifted out a faded photograph, its edges worn and creased from years of handling. It was a picture of my parents on their wedding day, beaming with joy and hope for the future that lay ahead of them. A lump formed in my throat as I traced the outline of their faces, my heart aching for the trust they had placed in Dennis, a trust he had so thoroughly shattered. Tucking the photograph safely into my bag, I continued my search, unearthing more treasures from the past. Old love letters from Dennis, souvenirs from our travels, even the tattered stuffed bear he had won for me at a carnival on our first date. Each item was a poignant reminder of the love we had once shared, a love that had been slowly poisoned by Joan's insidious influence and Dennis's own selfishness. But amidst the pain and heartache, A newfound sense of resolve took root within me. These mementos were not just reminders of what I had lost. They were proof of the life I had built, the sacrifices I had made, and the strength that had carried me through even the darkest of times. With a renewed sense of purpose, I began to gather the evidence I would need to expose Dennis and Joan's lies. Financial records, incriminating emails, anything that could shed light on the depth of their betrayal. As I pored over the documents, a clearer picture began to emerge, one of greed, manipulation, and utter disregard for the sanctity of our marriage. It was then that I knew what I had to do. I would not simply walk away and lick my wounds. No, I would fight back, rallying the support of those who had stood by me through thick and thin, those who had seen the truth of Dennis and Joan's actions long before I had been willing to open my eyes. One by one, I reached out to my closest friends and family members, laying bare the painful truth of what had transpired. And one by one, they rallied to my side, offering not just their sympathy, but their unwavering support and loyalty. I always knew there was something off about that woman, my oldest friend Beth spat, her eyes blazing with righteous fury. Just say the word, Maggie, and I'll make sure the whole town knows what kind of snakes they really are. Others echoed her sentiments, sharing their own stories of Joan's manipulative behavior and Dennis's increasingly erratic actions. It was as if a veil had been lifted, and suddenly the pieces all fell into place. I've been naive, yes, I admitted, my voice thick with emotion. But underestimating me is their biggest mistake. As the days passed, my network of allies grew stronger, each person bringing their own unique perspective and insights to the table. Together we pieced together a damning portrait of Dennis and Joan's misdeeds, a tapestry of lies and deceit that would be impossible to ignore or refute. And through it all, a newfound sense of strength and resilience took root within me. I was no longer the meek, downtrodden woman who had allowed herself to be controlled and belittled for far too long. No, I was a force to be reckoned with, a woman who had reclaimed her power and her sense of self-worth. As I looked around at the faces of those who had rallied to my side, I felt a surge of gratitude and determination. This was no longer just about me. It was about standing up for what was right, about refusing to let the toxic influence of people like Joan and Dennis poison the lives of others. With a deep breath, I squared my shoulders and turned to face the battle ahead. It was time to take the fight to them, to expose their lies and their betrayal for all the world to see. And this time I would not be silenced or cowed. This time I would emerge victorious, no matter the cost. The day of reckoning had finally arrived. As I stood before the gathered crowd of family and friends, a hush fell over the room, all eyes fixed on me with a mixture of curiosity and concern. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice steady despite the butterflies fluttering in my stomach. "I know there have been rumors circulating, whispers of discord within our family, and today I'm going to lay bare the truth, no matter how painful it may be." A murmur rippled through the crowd, but I pressed on, undeterred. For too long I've been a victim of manipulation and betrayal at the hands of those closest to me. My own husband, Dennis, and his mother, Joan, have conspired against me, trampling on the sanctity of our marriage and our family for their own selfish gains. Gasps of shock and disbelief echoed through the room, but I refused to falter. This was my moment, my chance to reclaim the dignity and respect that had been so cruelly stripped away from me. "It's true," I continued, my voice growing stronger with each word. "Dennis has been carrying on an affair with a younger woman, using my own inheritance to fund her business ventures behind my back." Turning to face my husband, I felt a surge of righteous anger coursing through my veins. "How could you, Dennis? How could you betray everything we built together, everything we sacrificed for this family?" He opened his mouth to speak, but I silenced him with a single, withering glare. "And you, Joan," I said, shifting my gaze to my mother-in-law's stony expression. "You were supposed to be my ally, my support system. Instead, you enabled and encouraged Dennis's betrayal, driven by your own twisted, possessive love for your son." Joan's eyes narrowed, her lips curling into a familiar sneer. "How dare you speak to me like that, you ungrateful little—" "Enough," I thundered, cutting her off mid-sentence. "I've endured your insults, your belittling, for far too long, but no more. This house, this legacy, it isn't yours to destroy. It's my blood, sweat, and tears you've trampled on, all for your own selfish desires. A heavy silence hung in the air, the weight of my words sinking in for all to bear witness. I could see the shock and disbelief etched on the faces of those around me, the realization that the perfect family they had envied was nothing but a carefully constructed facade. I have proof, I continued, holding up the thick manila envelope that contained the damning evidence of Dennis and Joan's misdeeds. Financial records, emails, photographs, all of it documenting the depths of their betrayal. Slowly, I began to circulate the documents, allowing each person to see for themselves the ugly truth that had been hidden for so long. Whispers and gasps of outrage rippled through the crowd, and I knew in that moment that the tide had turned. Dennis stepped forward, his eyes pleading with me for forgiveness. "Maggie, please, let me explain." But I cut him off with a sharp shake of my head. "There's nothing to explain, Dennis. You made your choices, and now you have to live with the consequences." Turning back to the crowd, I drew myself up to my full height, a newfound sense of strength and resolve coursing through my veins. "This is not the end," I declared, my voice ringing out with conviction. "This is just the beginning of a new chapter, one where I reclaim my dignity, my self-worth, and my rightful place in this family." A smattering of applause broke out, growing louder and more fervent as the weight of my words sank in. I could see the respect and admiration in their eyes, a stark contrast to the pity and condescension I had grown so accustomed to. In that moment, I knew that I had won. Not just a battle, but a war against the toxic influences that had sought to diminish and control me for far too long. As I looked around at the faces of those who had rallied to my side, I felt a surge of gratitude and pride. This was my family, my true family. The ones who had seen me at my lowest and still believed in me, still stood by my side. And as for Dennis and Joan, their downfall was inevitable, a consequence of their own selfish actions and misguided priorities. They had lost far more than just their reputations. They had lost the respect and loyalty of those who had once looked up to them. But I had gained something far more precious, my freedom, my self-respect, and the knowledge that I was truly loved and supported by those who mattered most. As I stepped down from the podium, a weight seemed to lift from my shoulders, replaced by a newfound sense of purpose and determination. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but for the first time in years, I felt truly alive, unburdened by the chains of manipulation and deceit that had held me captive for far too long. This was my moment, my chance to start anew and rebuild my life on my own terms. And as I looked towards the future, I couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement and possibility. After all, the best revenge is living well, and that's exactly what I intended to do. The aftermath of my public confrontation with Dennis and Joan was both exhilarating and exhausting. As I stepped out into the crisp evening air, I could feel the weight of years of pent-up anger and resentment finally lifting from my shoulders. "Maggie, over here!" I turned to see Beth waving me over, a broad grin splitting her face. She enveloped me in a fierce hug, her eyes shining with pride. "You were incredible in there," she said, giving my arm a gentle squeeze. "I've never seen you so strong, so confident." A small smile tugged at the corners of my mouth. I'll admit, it felt pretty damn good to finally stand up to those two. Beth nodded emphatically. "You have no idea how long I've been waiting for you to see them for who they really are. That mother-son duo has been nothing but trouble from the start." Her words rang true, and I felt a pang of regret for all the years I had spent making excuses for their behavior, turning a blind eye to the toxicity that had slowly poisoned my life. "Well, no more," I said firmly. "That chapter of my life is over. It's time for me to start fresh, to rebuild on my own terms." Beth beamed at me, her expression a mixture of admiration and relief. "I'm so proud of you, Maggie. You've come such a long way from the woman who used to let Joan walk all over her." I nodded, my mind drifting back to those dark days when Joan's constant belittling had left me feeling small and insignificant. But now, in the wake of my public triumph, I felt a newfound sense of strength and self-worth. "I've learned that true family stands by you, not controls you," I said, squeezing Beth's hand gratefully, "and I'll never let anyone walk over me again." As the weeks passed, I found myself reconnecting with old friends and family members who had rallied to my side during my darkest hours. Their support and encouragement buoyed me, reminding me that I was far from alone in this new chapter of my life. And as for Dennis and Joan, well, let's just say the aftermath of their exposed misdeeds was far from pretty. The once revered family name had been dragged through the mud, their reputations in tatters. I would catch glimpses of them around town, their expressions sullen and defeated, as if the weight of their own actions had finally caught up to them. But I refused to let their downfall consume me. Instead, I focused on rebuilding my life, one piece at a time. I reclaimed my cherished belongings from storage, carefully restoring the warmth and familiarity to the house that had once been my home. And slowly, steadily, I began to heal. Not just from the betrayal, but from years of emotional abuse and manipulation. It wasn't an easy journey, of course. There were moments when the pain and anger threatened to overwhelm me, when the temptation to wallow in bitterness was almost too strong to resist. But each time I would remind myself of how far I had come, of the strength and resilience that had carried me through the darkest of times. And as the months passed, something remarkable began to happen. The whispers and sideways glances that had once followed me gradually faded, replaced by nods of respect and admiration. It seemed that my public stand against Dennis and Joan had struck a chord with others who had suffered in silence, and my story had become a beacon of hope for those trapped in their own toxic situations. "It's good to see you back, Maggie," an old acquaintance remarked one day as I passed her in the grocery store. "Stronger than ever." I smiled, feeling a surge of pride and gratitude. "Thank you. It hasn't been easy, but I've learned that true strength comes from within, and from surrounding yourself with people who truly care about you." As I made my way home, my arms laden with bags of fresh produce and the promise of a new recipe to try, I couldn't help but marvel at how far I had come. The woman I was today was a far cry from the meek, downtrodden soul who had once allowed herself to be defined by the cruelty of others. No, I was a survivor, a fighter, a woman who had reclaimed her power and her sense of self-worth. And as I looked towards the future, I felt a sense of excitement and possibility that had been absent for far too long. This was my life, my story, and I was the author of my own destiny. The road ahead might be long and winding, but for the first time in years, I felt truly alive, unburdened by the weight of others' expectations and manipulations. As I stepped through the front door and into the warm embrace of my newly reclaimed home, I couldn't help but smile. This was just the beginning, the first chapter in a story that promised to be filled with adventure, growth, and the kind of hard-won wisdom that can only come from surviving the darkest of storms. And I couldn't wait to see what the future had in store. I stood in the kitchen, my hands gripping the edge of the counter so tightly, my knuckles turned white. Michael's words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. "Lily, we need to talk about Mom," he said, his voice tinged with that familiar mix of guilt and determination. I turned to face him, my heart already sinking. "What about her?" Michael ran a hand through his graying hair. "Her house needs emergency repairs, the foundation's cracking, and it's not safe for her to stay there." "Okay," I said slowly, bracing myself for what I knew was coming next. "She needs to move in with us, just for a few months until the work's done." The words hit me like a physical blow. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "Michael, we can't. You know how she is. She'll take over our lives." "She's my mother, Lily. What am I supposed to do? Let her live in a dangerous house?" I could feel the frustration building inside me. "There are other options. We could help her find a short-term rental, or—" "We can't afford that," Michael cut me off. "And she won't go for it anyway. She's family. This is what family does." I bit back a bitter laugh. Family. As if Martha had ever treated me like family in the 30 years I'd been married to her son. "Did you already tell her yes?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Michael's silence was confirmation enough. "Of course you did," I said, my voice rising. "Without even talking to me first. This is our home, Michael, our life. Don't I get a say?" "I'm sorry, Lily," he said, not sounding sorry at all. "But it's done. She'll be here next week." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "Next week? Michael, that's not enough time to—" "To what?" he snapped. "To come up with more excuses? She's coming, Lily. End of discussion. I watched him storm out of the kitchen, leaving me alone with the weight of his decision crushing down on me. I sank into a chair at the table, my mind reeling. Martha, living here. The thought alone was enough to make me want to run screaming from the house. The phone rang, startling me out of my daze. I answered it without thinking. "Hello, dear," came Martha's saccharine voice. "I hear I'll be staying with you for a while. Won't that be lovely?" I gritted my teeth. "Hello, Martha. Yes, Michael just told me." "Oh, good. I'm sure you'll make me feel right at home. You always were such a competent little homemaker." I could practically hear the sneer in her voice. "I'll do my best," I managed to say. "I'm sure you will," Martha said. "Oh, and dear, I hope you don't mind, but I'll need to bring Fluffy with me. You know how attached she is to her special chair. I'm sure you can find somewhere else to sit in the evenings." Fluffy, Martha's ancient, ill-tempered cat that hated everyone but her, and her special chair was my favorite reading spot in the living room. "Of course," I said, my free hand clenching into a fist. "Whatever makes you comfortable." "Wonderful. I knew you'd understand. See you next week, dear." The line went dead, and I let the phone drop from my hand. I stared at it, lying there on the table as the full reality of what was about to happen crashed over me. Martha was coming. She was going to invade my home, criticize my every move, and make my life a living hell. And Michael, the man who was supposed to be my partner, my protector, had invited her in without a second thought. I stood up, my legs shaky. I needed air. I needed space. I didn't know what I needed. But I knew one thing for certain. My life was about to change, and not for the better, and I had no idea how I was going to survive it. The day Martha moved in, our house transformed into a battleground. I'd spent the week preparing, scrubbing every surface until it gleamed, hoping to avoid her criticism. It didn't work. "Oh, Lily," Martha said, wrinkling her nose as she stepped inside. "You really should dust more often. I can see cobwebs in that corner." I bit my tongue, forcing a smile. "I'll take care of it, Martha." Michael lugged in her suitcases, grunting with effort. "Where do you want these, Mom?" "The guest room, of course," she said, as if it were obvious. "Though I suppose we should start calling it my room now." I felt a twinge of panic. "But that's my office. I need that space for work." Martha's eyes narrowed. "Work? At your age? Shouldn't you be thinking about retirement, dear?" "I'm only 58, I protested, "and I love my job." "Well, I'm sure you can find somewhere else to play with your computer," Martha said dismissively. "A grown woman shouldn't need a whole room for a hobby." I looked to Michael, silently pleading for support. He avoided my gaze. "Mom's right, Lily," he said. "You can set up your laptop in the living room or something." I felt like I'd been slapped. "But it's settled then," Martha interrupted. "Michael, be a dear and move my things in." "Lily, why don't you make us some tea?" I retreated to the kitchen, my hands shaking as I filled the kettle. This was only the beginning, and already I felt like a stranger in my own home. The next few days were a blur of snide comments and barely concealed insults. Martha criticized everything from my cooking to my clothes to the way I folded towels, and Michael, the man who once promised to stand by me through thick and thin, said nothing. One evening, I was working late on a project, my laptop balanced precariously on the arm of the sofa. Martha's cat Fluffy had claimed my favorite chair, hissing whenever I got too close. "Still pecking away at that thing?" Martha's voice made me jump. "It's nearly 9 o'clock, you know. A wife should have dinner on the table by now." I gritted my teeth. "Michael knows I have a deadline. He said he'd order pizza." Martha clicked her tongue disapprovingly. "Take out food at your age? No wonder you're putting on weight." "When I was your age." "I'm not putting on weight," I snapped, my patience finally wearing thin. Now, Martha said, her voice dripping with false concern. "There's no need to be defensive. I'm just looking out for your health. After all, you're not getting any younger, are you? And with no children to care for you in your old age?" The barb about my childlessness hit home as she knew it would. I blinked back tears, refusing to let her see how much it hurt. "I have work to do," I said, my voice tight. "Of course you do," Martha sighed. "It's a shame, really. If you'd focused more on being a proper wife and mother instead of chasing a career, things might have been different. Michael always wanted children, you know." I slammed my laptop shut, unable to take any more. "I'm going to bed." As I stormed past her, Martha called out, "Oh, and Lily, do try to be quieter in the morning. Your stomping around wakes me up and I need my beauty sleep." I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, Michael snoring softly beside me. How had it come to this? How had I let myself become a doormat in my own home? Something had to change. I couldn't go on like this, swallowing my anger and hurt day after day. But what could I do? As I drifted off into an uneasy sleep, a plan began to form in my mind. If Martha and Michael wouldn't listen to my words, maybe they needed to hear them played back. Tomorrow, I decided, I would buy a voice recorder. It was time to gather evidence of the hell my life had become. Little did I know, that decision would set in motion a chain of events that would change everything. The tiny voice recorder felt like a lifeline in my hand. I'd bought it on my lunch break, heart pounding as I handed over the cash. Now, back home, I slipped it into my pocket, my fingers brushing against the smooth plastic for reassurance. "Lily, is that you?" Martha's voice rang out from the living room. "Come in here, we need to talk." I took a deep breath, pressed the record button, and stepped into the lion's den. Martha sat in my chair, Fluffy curled in her lap. Michael stood by the window, his back to me. "There you are," Martha said, her tone dripping with false sweetness. "Michael and I have been discussing your situation." I felt a chill run down my spine. My situation? Your work, dear. It's becoming a problem. I glanced at Michael, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. "What do you mean?" Martha sighed dramatically. "You're never home, always hunched over that computer. It's not healthy, and it's certainly not fair to Michael." "I'm providing for us," I said, my voice tight. "My job is important." "More important than your family?" Martha's eyes narrowed. "Michael tells me you haven't even started dinner yet. It's already 6 o'clock. I bit back a retort, acutely aware of the recorder in my pocket. "I was planning to cook after I finished my project." "See?" Martha turned to Michael. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. No wonder you two never had children. She's too busy playing career woman to be a proper wife." The words hit me like a physical blow. I looked to Michael, silently begging him to defend me. He cleared his throat. "Mom's right, Lily. Maybe it's time to think about cutting back at work. We could use the help around here." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Michael, my job pays our mortgage. It's not some hobby I can just give up." "Don't be dramatic," Martha scoffed. "Michael makes plenty. You don't need to work. Unless—" She paused, her eyes glinting maliciously. "Unless you're planning to leave him. Is that it? Are you squirreling away money for a divorce?" "What?" "No," I sputtered, shocked by the accusation. Michael finally turned to face me, his expression a mix of hurt and anger. "Is that true, Lily? Are you planning to leave me?" I felt like I was drowning, gasping for air in a sea of absurdity. "Of course not. How could you even think that?" "Well, what are we supposed to think?" Martha interjected. "You're always working, never home. You barely speak to Michael anymore. If you're not saving for a divorce, then what exactly are you doing?" I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came out. How had we gotten here? How had my hard work and dedication become twisted into something sinister? "I think," Martha said, her voice low and dangerous, "that it's time you made a choice, Lily. Your family or your precious career." Michael nodded, his face set in grim lines. "She's right, Lily. Something has to change." I stood there, frozen, as the weight of their words crashed over me. They were asking me to give up everything I'd worked for, to become the subservient housewife I'd never wanted to be. In that moment, something inside me snapped. A lifetime of swallowing my anger, of biting my tongue, of trying to please everyone but myself. It all came rushing to the surface. "No," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "What was that?" Martha leaned forward, her eyes glittering with triumph. I straightened my spine, looked her dead in the eye, and said, "No, I won't choose. I won't give up my career, and I won't let you bully me anymore." The room fell silent. Martha's mouth hung open in shock. Michael stared at me like he'd never seen me before. I turned on my heel and walked out, my heart pounding in my chest. As I climbed the stairs to what used to be my office, I could hear Martha's shrill voice behind me. "Michael, are you going to let her speak to me like that? Do something." But I didn't stop. I didn't look back. For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. The recorder was still running in my pocket, capturing every word. This was just the beginning. The day of Ruth's 80th birthday arrived, and I felt sick to my stomach. I'd spent the past week avoiding Martha and Michael as much as possible, retreating to our bedroom with my laptop whenever I could. The voice recorder had become my constant companion, capturing every snide comment and heated argument. As we pulled up to Ruth's house, I plastered on a smile. "Ready?" I asked Michael. He grunted in response, barely looking at me. We'd hardly spoken since my outburst, the silence between us growing heavier by the day. Martha tottered out of the back seat, already unsteady on her feet. She'd started drinking in the car, claiming it was to calm her nerves. I bit my tongue, knowing any comment would only lead to another fight. Ruth greeted us at the door, her face lighting up when she saw me. "Lily, dear, so good to see you." She pulled me into a warm hug, then turned to Michael and Martha with a noticeably cooler demeanor. "Hello, you two." I felt a small surge of satisfaction at Ruth's obvious preference for me. At least someone in this family was on my side. The party was in full swing, the backyard filled with friends and relatives. I mingled, grateful for the chance to talk to people who didn't constantly belittle me. But I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had settled in my stomach. That feeling proved justified when Martha clinked her glass, demanding everyone's attention. "I'd like to make a toast," she slurred, her eyes unfocused, "to my darling son, Michael, and his wife." I tensed, sensing trouble. "Michael," Martha continued, her voice growing louder, "you've always been such a good boy, so patient, even when you married beneath you." A hush fell over the crowd. I felt all eyes turn to me, my cheeks burning with humiliation. "Mom," Michael said weakly, "maybe we should sit down." But Martha was on a roll. No, I need to say this. Lily here, she thinks she's so smart with her fancy job, but what kind of wife is she? Can't even give you children, can't even cook a decent meal." I stood frozen, unable to believe this was happening. Where was my voice recorder? I needed proof of this moment, this public humiliation. "And now," Martha went on, swaying slightly, "now she's trying to turn you against me. Your own mother." "Well, I won't stand for it. It's time you put her in her place, Michael. Tell her who's really important in this family." I turned to Michael, silently pleading with him to stop this, to defend me. But to my horror, he nodded. "You're right, Mom," he said, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent yard. "Lily's been selfish. She needs to learn her place." The world seemed to tilt around me. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. All I could feel was the weight of dozens of pitying stares. Ruth's voice cut through the fog. "That's quite enough," she said sharply. "Martha, Michael, you should be ashamed of yourselves." But the damage was done. I turned and ran, tears blurring my vision. I found myself in Ruth's guest bathroom, locking the door behind me. As I splashed cold water on my face, I caught sight of my reflection in the mirror. Who was this woman staring back at me? This broken, humiliated shell of a person? No, I wouldn't let them do this to me. I wouldn't let them reduce me to nothing. With shaking hands, I pulled out my phone and the voice recorder. I had weeks of evidence, weeks of abuse and gaslighting and manipulation. It was time to use it. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I was about to do. This would change everything. There would be no going back. But as I replayed Martha's drunken tirade in my mind, as I remembered Michael's betrayal, I knew I had no choice. It was time to fight back. I unlocked the bathroom door, my head held high. Let them think they'd broken me. Let them think they'd won. They had no idea what was coming. I emerged from the bathroom, my heart pounding but my resolve firm. The party had resumed its uneasy chatter, but I could feel the weight of curious glances. Martha's drunken tirade had left a palpable tension in the air. Ruth approached me, concern etched on her face. "Lily, dear, are you all right?" I managed a tight smile. "I will be, Ruth. Thank you." She squeezed my hand. "I'm so sorry about Martha and Michael. Their behavior is inexcusable." "You're right," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "and I'm not going to excuse it anymore." Ruth's eyes widened as I strode purposefully towards the center of the gathering. I caught sight of Michael and Martha, huddled together near the punch bowl. They both looked up as I approached, Martha's face twisting into a sneer. "Well, look who decided to grace us with her presence again," she slurred. "Come to apologize for ruining the party?" I didn't respond. Instead, I pulled out my phone and the voice recorder, connecting them with shaking hands. "What are you doing?" Michael asked, his brow furrowed. Something I should have done a long time ago, I replied. Before they could stop me, I pressed play. Martha's voice, shrill and cruel, filled the air. You're a disgrace, Lily. A barren, useless woman. Michael deserves better than you. Gasps rippled through the crowd. I watched as shock and horror dawned on the faces around me. Michael lunged forward, trying to grab the recorder. Turn that off! But I danced out of his reach, letting the recordings continue. His own voice joined his mother's, agreeing with her insults, laughing at her cruel jokes. You see, I said, my voice rising above the cacophony of recorded abuse. This is what I've been living with. This is what they're really like behind closed doors. Martha's face had gone pale. You've been spying on us? No, I retorted. I've been protecting myself, gathering evidence of the emotional abuse you've subjected me to for years. The recordings kept playing, a litany of insults and degradation that seemed to go on forever. I watched as disgust and anger replaced the pity in the eyes of our friends and family. Finally, Ruth stepped forward, her face a mask of fury. That's enough, she said, her voice trembling with rage. Martha, Michael, I want you both out of my house. Now. But Mom, Michael protested weakly. No buts, Ruth snapped. I've heard enough. What you've done to Lily is despicable. I'm ashamed to call you my son. As security escorted a protesting Martha and a shell-shocked Michael out, I felt a strange mix of vindication and exhaustion wash over me. The nightmare was finally over, but at what cost? Ruth approached me, tears in her eyes. Lily, I had no idea. I'm so sorry you've had to endure this. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. What will you do now? She asked gently. The question hung in the air, heavy with implications. I looked around at the faces of our friends and family, some supportive, others uncomfortable. I thought about the house I'd returned to, now tainted by months of abuse and betrayal. In that moment, I knew I couldn't go back. Couldn't pretend things could ever be the same. I don't know, I admitted. But I know I can't stay with Michael. Not after this. Ruth nodded, understanding in her eyes. Whatever you decide, you have my support. Your family, Lily, the kind of family I'm proud to have. As the party slowly dispersed, I stood alone in Ruth's backyard, watching the sun set on the life I'd known. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with legal battles and emotional turmoil. But for the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. I'd found my voice, my strength. And I knew whatever came next, I would face it on my own terms. The recorder sat heavy in my hand, a testament to my resilience and a key to my freedom. Tomorrow, I decided I would call a divorce lawyer. It was time to start my new life. The days following Ruth's birthday party were a whirlwind. I'd moved out of our house, staying with a sympathetic coworker while I sorted out my next steps. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from Michael, alternating between angry accusations and desperate pleas for forgiveness. I ignored them all. Today, I sat in my lawyer's office, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. The recordings I'd made were spread out on the desk between us, along with financial documents and other evidence of Michael and Martha's mistreatment. This is strong stuff, Lily, Sarah, my lawyer, said. With this evidence, we have a solid case for emotional abuse and grounds for divorce. I nodded, a mix of relief and anxiety churning in my stomach. What's our next step? We file for divorce and... Sarah was cut off by a commotion outside her office. The door burst open, and Michael stormed in, his face red with anger. Martha trailed behind him, her eyes darting around the room. How dare you? Michael shouted, slamming his hands on the desk. You think you can just walk away and destroy our family? I flinched but held my ground. There's nothing left to destroy, Michael. You and Martha took care of that. Sarah stood, her voice stern. Mr. Thompson, you need to leave. This is a private meeting. Michael ignored her, his gaze fixed on me. You manipulative bitch. Those recordings? They're out of context. You've turned everyone against us. The recordings speak for themselves, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Everyone heard the truth. Martha stepped forward, her face a mask of false concern. Lily, dear, we're worried about you. You're not thinking clearly. Come home and we can work this out as a family. I almost laughed at the absurdity. Family? You've never treated me like family. You've both made it clear that I'm nothing but a nuisance, a failure as a wife and woman. That's not true, Michael protested, but his words rang hollow. Sarah moved towards the door. I'm calling security. You need to leave now. As if on cue, 2 security guards appeared in the doorway. Michael's face contorted with rage. "You'll regret this," he snarled. "I'll make sure you walk away with nothing. You hear me? Nothing." As the guards escorted Michael and Martha out, I felt my resolve wavering. Was I really prepared for the battle ahead? Sarah returned to her seat, her expression grim. "I'm sorry about that, Lily, but their behavior only strengthens our case." I nodded, trying to steady my breathing. "What did Michael mean about me walking away with nothing?" Sarah's eyes narrowed. "Let's take a closer look at those financial documents." As we pored over bank statements and investment records, a sickening realization dawned on me. Large sums of money had been moving out of our joint accounts for months, funneled into accounts I didn't recognize. "He's been hiding assets," Sarah said, her voice tight with anger. "Preparing for this, most likely." I felt the room spin around me. All those years of hard work, saving, planning for our future, and Michael had been systematically dismantling it behind my back. "What do we do?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Sarah's expression was determined. "We fight. We'll need forensic accountants, maybe even private investigators. It won't be easy, Lily, but we can prove what he's done." I closed my eyes, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what lay ahead. The divorce, the financial battle, the inevitable smear campaign Michael and Martha would wage against me. It all seemed insurmountable. For a moment I considered giving up. Maybe it would be easier to crawl back, to accept Michael's version of events, to return to the life I knew, no matter how miserable. But then I thought of the recordings, of the years of abuse and gaslighting. I thought of Ruth's support, of the shocked faces at the party when they heard the truth. I couldn't go back. Not now, not ever. I opened my eyes, meeting Sarah's gaze. "Okay," I said, my voice growing stronger. "Let's do this. Whatever it takes, I'm ready." As Sarah began outlining our strategy, I felt a strange mix of terror and exhilaration. The road ahead would be hard, but for the first time in years, I was fighting for myself, and I was determined to win. The courtroom buzzed with tension as I took my seat beside Sarah. Across the aisle, Michael and Martha sat with their lawyer, both of them glaring daggers at me. I forced myself to look straight ahead, focusing on the judge's empty chair. This was it. The culmination of months of legal battles, financial investigations, and emotional turmoil. Everything I'd fought for hung in the balance. As the judge entered and the proceedings began, I found myself reliving the journey that had brought me here. The recordings that had exposed the truth, the shocking discovery of Michael's hidden assets, the grueling depositions where I'd had to relive every moment of abuse and betrayal. Sarah squeezed my hand reassuringly as she stood to present our case. Her voice was clear and confident as she laid out the evidence of emotional abuse, financial deception, and the systematic effort to undermine my self-worth and independence. "Your Honor," Sarah said, "the recordings you're about to hear demonstrate a clear pattern of emotional abuse perpetrated by both Mr. Thompson and his mother against my client." As the first recording played, I watched the judge's expression change from neutral to disturbed. Martha's shrill voice filled the courtroom, spewing vitriol about my supposed failings as a wife. Michael's voice chimed in, agreeing and adding his own cruel comments. I risked a glance at Michael and Martha. Martha's face was red with anger, while Michael looked pale and sick. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for them. Almost. Their lawyer tried to argue that the recordings were taken out of context, that they were private family matters not meant for public consumption. But the judge wasn't buying it. "Context or not," the judge said sternly, "this behavior is unacceptable." As the financial evidence was presented detailing Michael's elaborate scheme to hide assets, I saw his shoulders slump. He knew he was caught. Just when I thought it was all over, Martha suddenly stood up, her voice shrill and desperate. "This is all a lie. Lily's the abusive one. She manipulated Michael, turned him against me. She's trying to steal everything we have." The judge called for order, but Martha was beyond reason. She pointed at me, her face contorted with rage. "You ungrateful whore, after everything we've done for you." In that moment, something inside me snapped. All the fear, all the self-doubt, all the years of swallowing my anger, it all came rushing out. I stood, my voice ringing clear and strong. "No, Martha, you've done nothing for me except try to break me down. You and Michael both. But I'm not broken. I'm stronger than I've ever been." The courtroom fell silent. I could feel all eyes on me, but for once I didn't shrink from the attention. "I'm not here to steal anything," I continued. "I'm here to reclaim my life, my dignity, and the future you tried to take from me. And no matter what happens today, I've already won, because I'm free of you both." Martha sputtered incoherently, but Michael just stared at me, a mix of shock and something that looked almost like admiration on his face. The judge called for a recess, and as the courtroom emptied, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. Whatever the outcome, I knew I'd done the right thing. As we waited to be called back in, Sarah turned to me, her eyes shining with pride. "That was incredible, Lily. You've come so far." I nodded, surprising myself with a small smile. "I have, haven't I?" Just then, a court officer approached us. "The judge would like to see both parties in chambers," he said. My heart raced as we followed him. This was it, the moment of truth. As we entered the judge's chambers, I took a deep breath, steeling myself for whatever came next. Win or lose, I was ready to face my future on my own terms. The judge's chambers felt suffocating as we all gathered around her desk. Michael and Martha stood on one side, their lawyer whispering urgently to them. Sarah and I stood on the other, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure everyone could hear it. Judge Hawkins looked at each of us in turn, her expression unreadable. "I've heard enough," she said finally. "And frankly, I'm appalled by what I've seen and heard today." She turned to Michael and Martha. "Your behavior has been reprehensible. The emotional abuse, the financial deception, it's all grounds for a fault divorce." Michael's face fell, while Martha looked like she might explode. But the judge wasn't finished. "Mr. Thompson, your attempts to hide assets are particularly troubling. I'm inclined to award Mrs. Thompson not just half of the marital assets, but punitive damages as well." I felt a surge of vindication, but it was tempered by a strange sadness. This was really the end of my marriage, of the life I'd known for so long. The judge turned to me. "Mrs. Thompson, I commend your bravery in coming forward. It's clear you've been through a terrible ordeal." "Thank you, Your Honor," I managed to say. "However," she continued, "I'm concerned about the recordings. While they've proven invaluable as evidence, they were obtained without consent. In light of the circumstances, I'm choosing not to pursue any legal action regarding them, but I want to be clear that this is not something I condone." I nodded, understanding the fine line I'd walked. "Now," the judge said, "I have a proposal for you all. We can continue this trial, air all your dirty laundry in public, and I'll make my ruling. Or you can agree to mediation right now and settle this privately." There was a moment of tense silence. Then, to my surprise, Michael spoke up. "I'll agree to mediation," he said quietly. When Martha started to protest, he silenced her with a look. "It's over, Mom. We've lost." The next few hours were a blur of negotiations. In the end, we reached an agreement that left me with more than half of our assets, including the house. Michael would pay alimony, and Martha would have no contact with me. As we left the courthouse, I felt a strange mix of emotions: relief, sadness, and an overwhelming sense of freedom. Ruth was waiting outside, her face anxious. When she saw me, she rushed over and enveloped me in a hug. "Oh, Lily," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "I'm so proud of you." As we pulled apart, I saw Michael and Martha exiting the building. Martha stormed off without a word, but Michael hesitated, then approached us. "Lily," he said, his voice low, I'm sorry for everything." I looked at him, this man I'd loved for so long, and felt a complex mix of anger, pity, and something like forgiveness. "I hope you find peace, Michael," I said finally, "and I hope you learn from this." He nodded, then walked away. I watched him go, feeling the last threads of our life together finally snap. Ruth squeezed my hand. "What now, dear?" I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the past few months finally lifting. "Now, I start living for myself." In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into rebuilding my life. I redecorated the house, erasing all traces of Martha's presence. I reconnected with old friends and made new ones. I even started taking art classes, something I'd always wanted to do, but never had the courage to try. Ruth and I grew closer. Our bond strengthened by the trials we'd faced together. She became the mother figure I'd always longed for, supportive and loving without being overbearing. One evening, as we sat on my porch watching the sunset, Ruth turned to me with a smile. "You know, Lily, I always knew you had this strength in you. I'm just glad you finally see it too." I smiled back, feeling a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. Me too, Ruth. Me too. As the sky turned from gold to purple, I reflected on my journey. I'd lost a husband and a life I thought I wanted, but I'd gained something far more valuable, myself. At 58, I was starting a new chapter, one filled with possibilities I'd never dared to imagine before. And for the first time in a long time, I was excited for what the future might hold. I slammed the front door behind me, my hands shaking as I fumbled with my keys. The house was quiet, but the silence felt oppressive, heavy with unspoken truths. Jake's car wasn't in the driveway, and I knew exactly where he'd be. Not at work, like he'd told me this morning, but probably drowning his sorrows at O'Malley's again. "Damn it, Jake," I muttered, tossing my purse onto the kitchen counter. The answering machine blinked accusingly, and I hit play with more force than necessary. "Mrs. Lawson, this is Sandra from Midwest Insurance. I'm calling to follow up on the claim your husband filed last week regarding his termination." My stomach dropped. Termination? Jake had sworn up and down he'd quit his job at the bank 2 weeks ago, citing creative differences with his boss. I'd been skeptical. It was the third job he'd left in as many years, but I'd wanted to believe him. The machine beeped again. "Emma, honey, it's your mother-in-law. I hope you're not working too late again. Jake could really use your support right now. Call me back, dear." I deleted Martha's message with a vicious jab. Of course she'd take his side. In her eyes, Jake could do no wrong, and any of his shortcomings were clearly my fault. The front door creaked open, and I steeled myself. Jake stumbled in, reeking of whiskey and failure. "Hey, babe," he slurred, attempting a lopsided grin. "You're home early." "Cut the crap, Jake," I snapped. "I know you were fired. Why did you lie to me?" His face fell, guilt flashing in his bloodshot eyes. I didn't want to disappoint you again? So you thought lying was the better option?" I ran a hand through my hair, frustration building. How are we supposed to trust each other if you can't even be honest about something like this? Jake slumped onto the couch, head in his hands. "I'm sorry, Em. I really messed up this time." "This time?" I echoed, my voice rising. "Jake, this is becoming a pattern. We can't keep living like this. What happened?" He mumbled something about a missed deadline and an angry client. The same old story, different day. I paced the living room, my mind racing. "We need to make some changes," I said firmly. "I can't keep being the only reliable income in this household, and you need to." The phone rang, cutting me off. Jake lunged for it, relief evident on his face at the interruption. "Hello? Oh, hi, Mom," he said, shooting me a pleading look. I rolled my eyes and headed for the kitchen, needing some space. As I filled a glass of water, Jake's voice drifted in from the other room. "Yeah, Emma's here. She, found out about the job. No, I haven't told her that part yet." I froze, my grip tightening on the glass. What else was he hiding? "Mom, I don't think that's a good idea," Jake was saying, his voice low and urgent. "Emma won't—" "No, I know you're trying to help, but—" I stormed back into the living room. "Won't what, Jake? What brilliant plan has your mother cooked up now?" Jake's eyes widened in panic. "Nothing. It's nothing. Mom, I gotta go." He hung up quickly, avoiding my gaze. "Jake," I said, my tone dangerous. "What aren't you telling me?" He fidgeted with the phone cord, looking everywhere but at me. "It's just, Mom thought it might be good if she came to stay with us for a while, to help out, you know?" The glass slipped from my hand, shattering on the hardwood floor. Water and shards of glass spread at my feet, a perfect metaphor for the mess our life had become. "Your mother," I said slowly, "wants to move in with us?" Jake nodded miserably. "Just temporarily, until I can get back on my feet." I stared at him, speechless. This was a nightmare. Martha, with her judgmental looks and backhanded compliments, living under our roof? The very thought made my skin crawl. "Emma, please," Jake pleaded. "It won't be for long. We need the help, and—" "We?" I interrupted, my voice sharp. "There is no we in this decision, Jake. You and your mother don't get to decide how we handle your mistakes." I turned on my heel, carefully stepping over the broken glass. "Clean this up," I said over my shoulder. "I need some air." As I grabbed my keys and headed for the door, I heard Jake call out desperately, "Emma, wait! Where are you going?" I paused, my hand on the doorknob. "To figure out how to fix the mess you've made of our lives," I replied, not looking back. "And Jake, don't wait up." I stormed into my office the next morning, my head pounding from a restless night. The last thing I needed was to deal with Martha's judgmental attitude on top of Jake's lies. But there she was, her number flashing on my phone as it rang incessantly. "Emma speaking," I answered curtly, bracing myself. "Emma, dear," Martha's saccharine voice oozed through the line. "I hope I'm not interrupting your very important work." I gritted my teeth. "What can I do for you, Martha?" "I'm worried about Jake," she sighed dramatically. "He's been so down lately, I can't help but wonder if your career focus might be affecting him." My grip tightened on the receiver. "Excuse me?" "Well, you know how men are," Martha continued, oblivious to the anger building in my chest. "They need support, attention. Jake's always been sensitive. Perhaps if you were home more." "Martha," I cut her off, my voice dangerously low. "Jake is a grown man. His job troubles are his own responsibility." "But as his wife," I interrupted, "I've been supporting us financially for years while Jake hops from job to job. Don't you dare imply this is my fault." Martha gasped, affronted. "I'm only trying to help Emma. Someone needs to be there for Jake, and if you're too busy climbing the corporate ladder—" "Stop right there," I snapped. "My career isn't the problem. Jake's inability to hold down a job is. And frankly, Martha, your coddling isn't doing him any favors." "Well, I never," Martha huffed. "If that's how you feel, maybe it's best if I come stay with you both for a while. Jake clearly needs a supportive presence at home." My blood ran cold. "That won't be necessary," I said firmly. "Jake and I can handle our own affairs." "We'll see about that," Martha replied ominously before hanging up. I slammed the phone down, fuming. The nerve of that woman. As if I hadn't bent over backwards trying to help Jake. My phone buzzed with a text from him. "Mom's worried about us. Maybe we should let her visit?" I ignored it, focusing on my work. Hours flew by as I buried myself in spreadsheets and client calls, anything to avoid thinking about the mess waiting for me at home. It was nearly 8 p.m. when I finally left the office. As I pulled into our driveway, I froze. Martha's car was parked in my usual spot. I found them in the kitchen, Jake nervously stirring a pot while Martha fussed over place settings. "What's going on?" I demanded, dropping my briefcase with a thud. Martha turned, all smiles. "Emma, darling, we were wondering when you'd grace us with your presence. I hope you don't mind. I took the liberty of preparing dinner." "You took liberties, all right," I muttered, glaring at Jake. He avoided my gaze, suddenly very interested in his cooking. "Jake mentioned you two were having some difficulties," Martha continued, her tone dripping with false concern. "I thought a nice family dinner might help smooth things over." I laughed bitterly. "Family dinner? Is that what this is?" Jake finally looked up. Please. Mom's just trying to help." "Help?" I exploded. "By ambushing me in my own home? By blaming me for your problems?" Martha gasped. "I would never." "Save it," I snapped. "I heard enough this morning. You made it perfectly clear what you think of me and my career." Jake stepped between us. "Emma, that's not fair. Mom's here because she cares." "Oh, she cares all right," I retorted. "She cares about controlling our lives, about making me the villain in her perfect little narrative." "Now, Emma," Martha began, her voice sickly sweet, "I know you're under a lot of stress, but there's no need for dramatics. Why don't we all sit down and—" "No," I said firmly. "I'm not doing this. Not tonight." I turned to Jake. "You invited her here without even asking me, didn't you?" His guilty expression said it all. I grabbed my keys, my hands shaking with rage. "Emma, wait," Jake called as I headed for the door. "Where are you going?" I paused, my hand on the doorknob. "Somewhere I'm actually wanted," I replied coldly. "Enjoy your family dinner." As I slammed the door behind me, I heard Martha's voice drift out. "Well, I never. Jake, darling, you really need to do something about that wife of yours." I got in my car and drove, tears blurring my vision. How had my life come to this? And more importantly, how was I going to fix it? I pulled into the driveway after a long day at work, my stomach knotting as I saw Martha's car still parked where it had been for the past week. Taking a deep breath, I steeled myself and walked inside. The living room looked like a tornado had hit it. Martha's belongings were strewn everywhere, suitcases overflowing with clothes, boxes piled high with knickknacks, and framed photos of her and Jake littering every surface. "What the hell is going on?" I demanded, my voice echoing through the house. Jake emerged from the kitchen, looking sheepish. "Emma, honey, I can explain." "Jake invited me to stay for a while," Martha interrupted, sweeping into the room with a triumphant smile. "Isn't it wonderful? Now I can help out around the house and give you more time to focus on your career." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Stay? For how long?" Jake shuffled his feet, avoiding my gaze. "Well, you see, Mom's having some financial troubles of her own. I thought maybe she could live with us until she gets back on her feet." "Live with us?" I repeated, my voice rising. "Jake, we can barely afford to keep ourselves afloat. How are we supposed to support your mother, too?" Martha clucked her tongue. "Now, Emma, there's no need to be so dramatic. I'm sure with a little belt-tightening we can make it work. After all, family comes first." I whirled on her. "This isn't your decision to make, Martha. This is our home, mine and Jake's." "Of course it is, dear," Martha said patronizingly. "But Jake agrees it's for the best. Don't you, sweetheart?" Jake nodded weakly, and I felt something inside me snap. "How dare you?" I hissed, advancing on him. "How dare you make this decision without even talking to me? This is my house too, Jake. My life." Please," Jake pleaded. "Mom needs our help. We can't just turn our backs on her." "Like you turned your back on your job responsibilities," I shot back. "Or how about how you've turned your back on our marriage by lying to me?" Martha gasped. "Emma, that's no way to speak to your husband." I rounded on her. "And you waltz in here, criticizing my choices, blaming me for Jake's shortcomings, and now you expect me to support you?" "I'm only trying to help," Martha sniffed. "Someone needs to keep this family together." "We were doing just fine before you showed up," I snapped. Jake stepped between us. "Emma, that's enough. Mom's staying, and that's final." I stared at him, disbelief and betrayal coursing through me. "Final? You don't get to make that decision unilaterally, Jake." "Well, someone has to make decisions around here," he retorted. "You're never home anyway." The words hit me like a physical blow. I stumbled back, grabbing my purse. "I'm never home because I'm working my ass off to keep us afloat while you bounce from job to job." "Emma, wait," Jake started, but I was already heading for the door. "No, Jake, I'm done waiting. I'm done being the bad guy in this scenario." I paused at the threshold, turning back to face them both. "You want to play happy families with Mommy Dearest? Fine, but don't expect me to stick around and watch." "Where are you going?" Jake called after me. "To a hotel," I replied coldly, since apparently I'm no longer welcome in my own home. As I got into my car, I heard Martha's voice drift out the open door. "Let her go, Jake. She'll come to her senses eventually. Now, why don't you help me unpack?" I peeled out of the driveway, tears blurring my vision. How had it come to this? My husband choosing his mother over me, my home invaded, my life upended. As I drove aimlessly through the darkening streets, a cold resolve settled over me. If Jake and Martha wanted to play dirty, fine. Two could play at that game. It was time to start planning my next move and my revenge. I'd been staying at the Comfort Inn for a week, trying to gather my thoughts and plan my next move. The constant buzzing of my phone, Jake's desperate texts, and Martha's passive-aggressive voicemails only fueled my determination. I needed to go home and face this head-on. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed Jake's car was gone. Perfect. I could grab some clothes without a confrontation. But as I entered the house, I heard Martha's shrill voice coming from the kitchen. "I don't care what it takes, Richard. You can't do this to me now." I froze, my hand still on the doorknob. Martha was clearly in the middle of a heated phone call, unaware of my presence. "Don't you dare bring up my indiscretion," she hissed. "You're the one who's been embezzling from the company for years." My eyes widened. What on earth was going on? "Fine, file for divorce," Martha spat. "But don't think I won't take you for everything you're worth. I know where all the bodies are buried, Richard." The call ended abruptly, and I heard Martha's muffled sobs. Despite my anger, a small part of me felt a twinge of sympathy, but that feeling evaporated as soon as Martha spoke again, this time leaving a voicemail. "Jake, honey, it's Mom. Listen, I need you to talk to Emma about accessing some of your joint savings. It's just a small loan to tide me over. I'm sure she'll understand. After all, we're family." Red-hot fury coursed through me. How dare she? I stormed into the kitchen, making Martha jump. "Emma!" she gasped, hastily wiping her eyes. "I didn't hear you come in." "Clearly," I said coldly. "Too busy trying to swindle us out of our savings, were you?" Martha's face paled. You heard that?" "Every word," I confirmed, "including your charming conversation with Richard. Infidelity and embezzlement, Martha. My. What would the neighbors say? You don't understand, Martha pleaded, her earlier bravado crumbling. Richard's trying to ruin me. I need help. I laughed bitterly. And your solution is to ruin us instead? To bleed us dry while you've been sitting pretty on stolen money for years? It wasn't like that, Martha protested. Richard handled all the finances. I didn't know. Save it, I snapped. I don't want to hear your excuses. What I want is for you to pack your bags and get out of my house. Martha's eyes narrowed. You can't throw me out. Jake invited me to stay. Watch me, I growled, advancing on her. You've manipulated and lied to us from the moment you got here. You blamed me for Jake's problems, invaded our home, and now you're trying to steal from us. I am Jake's mother, Martha shrieked. He'll never choose you over me. The front door slammed, and Jake's voice called out, Mom? Emma? What's going on? Martha's face transformed instantly, tears welling up in her eyes as Jake entered the kitchen. Oh, Jake, she wailed. Emma's being so cruel. She wants to throw me out on the street. Jake looked between us, confusion evident on his face. Emma, what? Don't you dare fall for her act, I warned him. Your mother's been lying to us both. She's getting divorced because she cheated on Richard, just who's been embezzling money for years, and now she wants to borrow from our savings to cover her ass. Jake's jaw dropped. Mom, is this true? Martha's sobs intensified. Jake, please. You don't understand. I had no choice. I turned to Jake, my voice steel. It's time to make a decision, Jake. Either she goes or I do, for good this time. The tension in the room was palpable as Jake looked between his sobbing mother and me, his wife, standing firm and unyielding. I could see the conflict in his eyes, years of maternal manipulation warring with the truth laid bare before him. Jake, I said softly, but with conviction. This is it. This is the moment that decides our future. Choose wisely. As Jake opened his mouth to speak, I held my breath, knowing that whatever came next would change all of our lives forever. Jake's eyes darted between Martha and me, his face a mask of confusion and pain. I need some time to think, he stammered, backing out of the kitchen. Jake, please! Martha wailed, reaching for him. But he was already gone, the front door slamming behind him. I stood there, trembling with rage and hurt. I hope you're happy, Martha, I spat. You've torn this family apart. Martha's tear-streaked face hardened. You did that all on your own, Emma, if you'd been a proper wife. Don't you dare, I hissed, cutting her off. I'm going to pack some things. When I come back down, I expect you to be gone. I stormed upstairs, my mind reeling. As I threw clothes into a suitcase, I heard Martha's muffled voice. She was on the phone again. Quietly, I crept to the top of the stairs to listen. Richard, please, she was saying, her voice desperate. I need more time. No, don't call the lawyers yet. I have a plan. My blood ran cold. What was she up to now? Jake and Emma have savings, Martha continued. If I can just get access. No, they don't suspect anything. Emma's too caught up in her career to notice. I gripped the banister, my knuckles turning white. She was planning to steal from us. Just give me a week, Martha pleaded. I'll have the money, and we can make this all go away. I'd heard enough. I marched downstairs, my face a thundercloud. Martha jumped as I entered the room, hastily ending her call. Emma, save it, I snapped. I heard everything. You're not just trying to borrow money, you're planning to steal it. Martha's face crumpled. You don't understand. Richard will ruin me if I don't pay him off. I had no choice. There's always a choice, I said coldly. And you chose to lie, cheat, and steal. Well, guess what? It ends now. I pulled out my phone and dialed Jake's number. It went straight to voicemail. Jake, it's Emma. Your mother is planning to steal our savings to pay off Richard. Come home now. We need to talk. Martha lunged for me, trying to grab the phone. You can't do this, she shrieked. I dodged her, my voice rising. Watch me. It's over, Martha. Your lies, your manipulation, all of it. Just then, the front door opened. Jake walked in, his face ashen. I heard everything, he said quietly. The voicemail came through as I was sitting in the car. Martha collapsed onto the couch, sobbing. Jake, sweetheart, please, you don't understand. I understand perfectly, Jake interrupted, his voice hard. You've been lying to us, Mom. Using us. And now you are going to steal from us? I felt a surge of hope. Was Jake finally seeing the truth? But then he turned to me, his eyes cold. And you, Emma, you've been so wrapped up in your job, you didn't even notice what was happening in our own home. My jaw dropped. Are you serious right now? I've been supporting us while you can't hold down a job. I've been putting up with your mother's constant criticism and manipulation. Jake shook his head. Maybe if you'd been around more, none of this would have happened. I stared at him, disbelief and fury warring inside me. In that moment, I saw my future laid out before me. A life of constantly being blamed, of never being enough, of sacrificing everything for a man who would always choose his mother over me. You know what? I said, my voice deadly calm. You're right, Jake. I haven't been around enough, so let me fix that right now. I grabbed my suitcase and headed for the door. Jake called after me. Emma, wait! Where are you going? I paused at the threshold, looking back at the two people who had betrayed me so deeply. I'm leaving, I said firmly. For good this time. You two deserve each other. As I walked out, I heard Martha's triumphant whisper to Jake, It's for the best, darling. Now, about that savings account. I got into my car, my hands shaking as I gripped the steering wheel. This wasn't just about leaving anymore. It was about protecting myself and everything I'd worked for. It was time to call a lawyer and start divorce proceedings. Jake and Martha wanted to play dirty? Fine. I'd show them just how ruthless I could be. I sat in my lawyer's office, reviewing the divorce papers for what felt like the 100th time. 2 weeks had passed since I'd walked out on Jake and Martha, and I was determined to protect myself and my assets. Everything looks in order, Emma, my lawyer Sarah said. We've frozen the joint accounts, and Jake won't be able to touch your personal savings. Are you ready to file? I took a deep breath, my hand hovering over the papers. This was it. The point of no return. Just as I was about to sign, my phone buzzed. Martha's number flashed on the screen. Ignore it, Sarah advised, but something made me hesitate. I should at least hear what she has to say, I muttered, answering the call. Emma? Martha's voice was uncharacteristically small. Please don't hang up. I need to talk to you. I have nothing to say to you, Martha, I replied coldly. Please, she begged. I've made a terrible mistake. I need your help. Against my better judgment, I found myself listening as Martha poured out a story of deceit and desperation. Her voice cracked as she admitted to her affair, to the lies she'd told Jake about me, to her plan to use our money to cover up her husband's embezzlement. I never meant for it to go this far, she sobbed. I thought if I could just buy some time, fix things with Richard, but it's all fallen apart. He's filing for divorce, threatening to expose everything. I have nowhere else to turn. I felt a mix of emotions, anger, pity, vindication. Why are you telling me this now, Martha? Because I realize now how wrong I was, she whispered. About everything, about you. I need your help, Emma. Not just for me, but for Jake, too. My heart clenched at the mention of Jake's name. What about Jake? Martha's voice trembled. He's a mess, Emma. He finally sees the truth, but he doesn't know how to fix things. He misses you terribly. I closed my eyes, fighting back tears. It's too late for that, Martha. I'm at my lawyer's office right now, about to file for divorce. No, Martha cried. Please, Emma, give us a chance to make this right. I'll tell Jake everything, I swear. Just come home. Let's talk face to face. I looked at the divorce papers in front of me, then at Sarah, who was watching me with concern. I need to think about this, I said finally. Of course, Martha replied, hope creeping into her voice. Take all the time you need. We'll be here. I ended the call, my mind reeling. Sarah leaned forward, her brow furrowed. Emma, whatever she said, remember why you're here. Don't let her manipulate you again. I nodded absently, but my resolve was wavering. What if Martha was telling the truth? What if this was my chance to finally get the whole story, to confront both her and Jake with all the facts? I need to go, I said abruptly, standing up. I'm sorry, Sarah. I need to see this through. Sarah sighed, but nodded understanding. Be careful, Emma, and call me if you need anything. As I drove home, was it still home? My emotions warred within me. Part of me was screaming that this was a trap, that Martha and Jake would never change. But another part, a part I thought I'd silenced, whispered of hope and second chances. I pulled into the driveway, my heart pounding. The house looked the same, but everything felt different. As I approached the front door, I saw Jake through the window, pacing anxiously. Our eyes met, and I saw a flash of relief cross his face. My hand trembled as I reached for the doorknob. This was it, the moment of truth. Whatever happened next would determine the course of all our lives. I took a deep breath and opened the door, stepping into the unknown. As I stepped into the house, the air felt thick with tension. Jake stood in the living room, his face a mixture of relief and apprehension. Martha sat on the couch, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. "Emma," Jake breathed, taking a step towards me. "I'm so glad you came." I held up a hand, stopping him in his tracks. "I'm here to listen. Nothing more. Martha, you said you had something to tell us both. So talk." Martha nodded, her eyes brimming with tears. I've been lying to you both about everything." For the next 20 minutes, Martha spilled her secrets. Her affair with a family friend, Richard's embezzlement from his company, their impending divorce, and her desperate plan to use our money to cover it all up. With each revelation, Jake's face grew paler, his hands clenching into fists. "How could you, Mom?" he whispered, his voice breaking. "How could you lie to us like this?" Martha sobbed, reaching for Jake, but he recoiled. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I never meant for it to go this far. I thought I could fix everything before you found out." I stood there, a storm of emotions raging inside me. Anger at Martha's deception, pity for her desperation, and a growing realization that Jake had been as much a victim of her manipulation as I had. "Jake," I said softly, turning to my husband, "did you know any of this?" He shook his head, looking shell-shocked. "No, God, Emma, I had no idea. I thought Mom just needed our help. I never imagined." "That's why I called you," Martha interjected, her voice pleading. "I realize now how wrong I was. About everything. I need your help, both of you. Please." I laughed bitterly. "Help? After everything you've done? You tried to steal from us, Martha. You nearly destroyed our marriage." "I know," she wailed, "and I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you both. But right now, I need your help to fix this mess with Richard. If we don't act fast, he'll expose everything, and we'll all go down." Jake turned to me, his eyes desperate. "Emma, what should we do?" I felt the weight of the moment pressing down on me. This was it. The crossroads where I had to decide not just the fate of my marriage, but the future of our entire family. "No," I said firmly, surprising even myself with the steel in my voice. "We're not doing this, Martha. Not anymore." "But," Martha started, but I cut her off. "No more lies, no more schemes. You made this mess, and you're going to face the consequences. We all are." I turned to Jake, my heart pounding. "I love you, Jake, but I can't keep living like this. We can't keep enabling your mother's behavior." Jake nodded slowly, realization dawning in his eyes. "You're right. Mom, I'm sorry, but Emma's right. We can't help you cover this up." Martha's face crumpled. "But what am I supposed to do? Where will I go?" "That's not our problem anymore," I said, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. "Jake, we need to talk. Alone." As we left Martha sobbing on the couch, Jake and I retreated to the kitchen. The air between us was charged with unspoken words and lingering hurt. "Emma," Jake began, his voice thick with emotion, "I've been such a fool. Can you ever forgive me?" I looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in months. I saw the man I fell in love with, but I also saw the weak-willed son who had let his mother come between us. "I don't know, Jake," I said honestly. "I love you, but I don't know if love is enough anymore. We have a lot to work through." Jake nodded, tears in his eyes. "I understand. Whatever it takes, Emma. I want to make this right." As we stood there in our kitchen, the sound of Martha's sobs drifting in from the living room, I realized that this was just the beginning. We had a long, hard road ahead of us, facing the consequences of Martha's actions, rebuilding trust, and figuring out if our marriage could survive this ultimate test. But for the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. Whatever happened next, I knew I had the strength to face it head-on. 1 year later, I stood in my new apartment, surrounded by boxes and the promise of a fresh start. The divorce had been finalized 3 months ago, and I was finally ready to close this chapter of my life. My phone buzzed with a text from my boss. "Congratulations on the promotion, Emma. Can't wait to see what you'll do as our new marketing director." I smiled, a sense of pride washing over me. This was what I had been working towards all along, recognition for my skills and dedication, not judgment for my ambition. As I unpacked, I came across a photo of Jake and me from happier times. A twinge of sadness hit me, but it was quickly replaced by a sense of peace. We had tried to work things out after Martha's confession, but the trust was too badly broken. In the end, we both realized that sometimes love isn't enough. The doorbell rang, startling me from my reverie. I opened it to find Martha standing there, looking older and more subdued than I remembered. "Emma," she said softly, "I hope I'm not intruding. I wanted to apologize, again, and to give you this." She handed me an envelope. Inside was a check for a substantial amount, far more than she'd ever tried to take from us. "It's everything I have," Martha explained, her voice trembling. "I sold the house, my jewelry. I want to make amends for what I did to you and Jake." I stared at the check, a whirlwind of emotions coursing through me. "Martha, Please," she interrupted. "I know it doesn't fix anything, but I hope it helps you start your new life. I see that now." As I looked at this woman who had caused me so much pain, I felt the last of my anger melting away. "Thank you, Martha, but I don't need this. I've already started my new life." I handed the check back to her. "Use it to start over yourself. Learn from this and be better." Martha's eyes filled with tears. "You're a remarkable woman, Emma. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner." After she left, I sat on my new couch, processing what had just happened. My phone buzzed again, a text from Jake this time. "Heard about your promotion. Congratulations, Em. You always were the strong one." I smiled sadly, typing back a simple "thank you." As I hit send, I realized that this truly was the end of an era. Jake and Martha would always be a part of my past, but they no longer had the power to shape my future. I walked to the window, looking out at the city skyline. My new life stretched before me, full of possibilities. No more compromising my dreams, no more dimming my light to make others comfortable. I was free to be unapologetically myself. As the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, I felt a sense of excitement building within me. Tomorrow was a new day, the first day of the rest of my life, and I was ready to face it head-on, stronger and wiser than ever before. I thought about all the women out there facing similar struggles, torn between family obligations and personal ambitions, fighting to be heard and valued. I hoped that my story might inspire them to stand up for themselves, to demand the respect and love they deserved. In that moment, I made a promise to myself. I would use my new position not just to advance my career, but to mentor other women, to help them find their voices and chase their dreams. My journey had been difficult, but it had taught me invaluable lessons about resilience, self-worth, and the power of staying true to oneself. As night fell, I raised a glass to my reflection in the window. "Here's to new beginnings," I toasted, "to strength, to growth, and to never settling for less than you deserve." The future was bright, and for the first time in years, I felt truly, genuinely happy. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I knew I had the strength to face them. After all, I was Emma, resilient, ambitious, and finally, gloriously free. "Mom, oh no, this can't be." Grace's voice cuts through the quiet evening, jolting me from my thoughts as I prepare dinner in the kitchen. My heart races as I rush to the living room, fearing the worst. "Grace, honey, what's wrong?" I ask, my voice trembling slightly. I find my 10-year-old daughter standing by the lamp, her face pale and her eyes wide with fear. "There's something weird in the lamp, Mom," she whispers, pointing at the base of the lamp with a shaky finger. I approach the lamp cautiously, my mind spinning with possibilities. As I examine the base, I notice a small, unfamiliar device attached to it. A chill runs down my spine as realization dawns on me. "Is that a wiretap?" I mutter under my breath, my heart sinking. Grace looks up at me, her eyes filled with confusion and fear. "What's a wiretap, Mom?" I take a deep breath, trying to compose myself for my daughter's sake. "It's something that people use to listen to other people's conversations without them knowing," I explain gently, pulling her into a reassuring hug. As I hold Grace close, my mind races with questions. Who would do this to us? Why would someone invade our privacy like this? A sense of violation and anger begins to build inside me, but I push it down, focusing on comforting my daughter. "Don't worry, sweetie," I say, stroking her hair. "We'll figure this out. I won't let anyone hurt our family." Grace nods, burying her face in my shoulder. "I'm scared, Mom," she whispers, her voice muffled. "I know, honey, but we'll get through this together. I promise." I hold her tightly, my determination growing with each passing moment. As I stand there, holding my daughter in the living room, I can't help but feel a sense of dread wash over me. The realization that someone has been listening to our private conversations, invading our most intimate moments, makes my skin crawl. I think back to the strained relationship I've had with my mother-in-law, Frances, over the years. The constant meddling, the subtle jabs at my parenting, the way she always seems to undermine my authority in my own home. Could she be behind this? The thought makes my stomach churn. I glance around the room, suddenly feeling exposed and vulnerable. How long has this been going on? What have they heard? The questions swirl in my mind, each one more unsettling than the last. But I know I can't let my fear consume me. I have to be strong for Grace, for our family. I take a deep breath, squaring my shoulders as I gently pull away from my daughter's embrace. "Okay, Grace, here's what we're going to do," I say, my voice steady and calm. "We're going to call the police and report this. They'll help us figure out who did this and keep us safe." Grace nods, her eyes still wide with fear but a glimmer of trust shining through. "Okay, Mom, I trust you." Those 3 simple words fill me with a renewed sense of purpose. I will protect my family, no matter what it takes. I won't let anyone tear us apart or destroy the love and trust we've built. As I reach for the phone to dial 911, I feel a wave of determination wash over me. This is just the beginning, I know. But I'm ready to face whatever comes our way, armed with the love and strength of my family by my side. As I wait for the police to arrive, my mind drifts back to the countless times Frances has meddled in our lives. Her obsession with Doris has always been a point of contention, but I never imagined it would lead to something like this. I remember the day we moved into this house, how excited we were to start our new life together. But Frances was there, her disapproving gaze sweeping over every inch of our home. "Doris, dear, are you sure this is the best you can do?" she had said, her voice dripping with condescension. Over the years, her interference only grew worse. She would drop by unannounced, criticizing my cooking, my parenting, even the way I decorated our home. I tried to maintain peace for Doris's sake, but it was a constant struggle. One particular incident stands out in my mind. It was Grace's 5th birthday, and we had invited some of her friends over for a small party. Frances had insisted on being there, despite my reservations. As the children played in the backyard, I overheard Frances talking to one of the other mothers. "Beth just doesn't have what it takes to be a proper mother," she said, her voice loud enough for me to hear. "Poor Doris, having to put up with her inadequacies." I felt my face flush with anger and embarrassment. How dare she speak about me like that, in my own home? I wanted to confront her, but I knew it would only make things worse. Instead, I focused on making sure Grace had a wonderful birthday. I pushed down my own hurt and frustration, determined not to let Frances ruin this special day for my daughter. But now, as I sit here waiting for the police, I realize that Frances's meddling has gone too far. The wiretaps, the invasion of our privacy. It's unforgivable. I hear a knock at the door and take a deep breath, steeling myself for what's to come. As I open the door, I'm relieved to see 2 officers standing there, their faces serious but kind. "Mrs. Thompson?" one of them asks, and I nod. "We received a call about a possible wiretapping situation. Can you tell us what happened?" I invite them in and begin to explain, my voice shaking slightly as I recount the events of the evening. They listen intently, taking notes and asking questions. As I talk, I can't help but feel a sense of betrayal wash over me. How could Frances do this to us, to her own son and granddaughter? The thought makes my stomach churn. The officers assure me that they will investigate the matter thoroughly. They take the wiretap as evidence and promise to keep me updated on their progress. After they leave, I sit down heavily on the couch, my head in my hands. I feel like I'm in a nightmare, one that I can't seem to wake up from. Grace comes over and sits beside me, her small hand resting on my arm. "Mom, are we going to be okay?" she asks, her voice small and uncertain. I look at her, my brave, beautiful daughter, and I know that I have to be strong for her. "Yes, honey, we're going to be okay," I say, pulling her into a tight hug. "I promise." But even as I say the words, I know that things will never be the same. France's actions have set something in motion, something that I fear will tear our family apart. As I hold Grace close, I vow to myself that I will do whatever it takes to protect her, to keep her safe from the toxicity that threatens to engulf us. No matter what happens, I will always be there for her, my love for her unwavering and unbreakable. The days following the discovery of the wiretap are a blur of police interviews and hushed conversations with Doris. We try to shield Grace from the worst of it, but I can see the confusion and fear in her eyes. One evening, as we're sitting around the dinner table, Doris clears his throat and looks at me, his expression serious. "Beth, I think we need to talk about my mother." I feel my stomach clench at the mention of Frances. "What about her?" I ask, trying to keep my voice steady. "I think we need to limit our visits to her house for a while," he says, his eyes searching mine for a reaction. "At least until this whole wiretapping situation is resolved." I nod, relief washing over me. "I think that's a good idea," I say, reaching out to take his hand. "We need to focus on our own family right now." Grace looks up from her plate, her brow furrowed. "Does that mean we won't see Grandma anymore?" she asks, her voice small. I exchange a glance with Doris before turning to our daughter. "We'll still see Grandma, sweetie," I say, trying to reassure her. "Just not as often as before." Grace nods, but I can see the uncertainty in her eyes. My heart aches for her, for the innocence that's being stripped away by Frances's actions. The next day, I'm in the kitchen making lunch when the phone rings. I answer it, expecting it to be the police with an update on the investigation. Instead, I hear Frances's voice on the other end of the line. "Beth, dear, how are you?" she asks, her tone saccharine sweet. I feel my jaw clench at the sound of her voice. "What do you want, Frances?" I ask, not bothering to hide the anger in my voice. "I just wanted to check in on my favorite daughter-in-law," she says, her words dripping with false sincerity. "I heard about the little incident with the wiretap. Such a shame." I grip the phone tighter, my knuckles turning white. "A shame?" I repeat, my voice rising. "Is that all you have to say about it?" Now, Beth, there's no need to get upset," Frances says, her tone condescending. "I'm sure it was just a misunderstanding." I feel my blood boil at her words. "A misunderstanding?" I say, my voice shaking with anger. "Someone invaded our privacy, Frances. They listened to our conversations, our private moments. And you think it's just a misunderstanding?" There's a pause on the other end of the line. "Beth, dear, you're overreacting," Frances says, her voice cold. "I'm sure whoever did this had their reasons." I can't believe what I'm hearing. "Their reasons?" I repeat, my voice rising to a shout. What possible reason could anyone have for doing something like this? "Perhaps they were concerned about your ability to be a good mother," Frances says, her words like a slap in the face. "Perhaps they wanted to make sure Grace was being properly cared for." I feel like I've been punched in the gut. How dare she question my ability to be a mother? How dare she use my daughter as a weapon against me? "I am a damn good mother, Frances," I say, my voice low and dangerous, "and I will not let you or anyone else tell me otherwise." I hang up the phone before she can respond, my hands shaking with rage. I lean against the counter, taking deep breaths to try and calm myself. Doris comes into the kitchen, his face etched with concern. "Beth, what's wrong?" he asks, coming over to wrap his arms around me. I bury my face in his chest, tears streaming down my cheeks. "Your mother," I say, my voice muffled. "She had the nerve to question my ability to be a good mother." I feel Doris stiffen against me. "She what?" he says, his voice low and angry. I pull back to look at him, my eyes red and puffy. "She implied that whoever put the wiretap in our house did it because they were concerned about Grace's well-being," I say, my voice breaking. Doris's face hardens, his jaw clenching. "That's it," he says, his voice firm. "We need to distance ourselves from her, Beth, for our own sanity." I nod, relief and gratitude washing over me. "Thank you," I whisper, burying my face in his chest once more. As we stand there, holding each other in the kitchen, I know that we've reached a turning point. We can no longer allow Frances to control our lives, to dictate our happiness. It's time to take a stand, to protect our family from her toxic influence. No matter what it takes, we will find a way to break free from her grasp and build a life of our own, one filled with love, trust, and respect. In the weeks following our decision to distance ourselves from Frances, I find myself constantly on edge, jumping at every unexpected sound or movement. The police investigation into the wiretapping is ongoing, but they haven't made any significant breakthroughs yet. One afternoon, as I'm cleaning the house, I decide to rearrange the furniture in the bedroom. As I'm moving the bed, I notice something strange behind the headboard. My heart races as I reach out and pull out another wiretap, similar to the one we found in the living room. I feel my stomach drop as I realize the extent of the invasion. How many more of these devices are hidden throughout our home? Who has been listening to our most intimate conversations? With shaking hands, I call Doris at work. "Doris, I found another one," I say, my voice trembling. "In our bedroom." There's a pause on the other end of the line. "I'll be right there," he says, his voice tight with anger. When Doris arrives home, we search the house from top to bottom, finding wiretaps in almost every room. The kitchen, the bathroom, even Grace's bedroom. I feel sick to my stomach as I imagine someone listening to my daughter's private moments. We call the police, who arrive quickly and begin a thorough investigation. They dust for fingerprints and take the wiretaps as evidence, promising to do everything they can to find the person responsible. As the officers leave, I turn to Doris, my eyes filled with tears. "I can't stay here," I say, my voice breaking. "I don't feel safe." Doris nods, his face etched with concern. "I understand," he says, pulling me into a tight hug. "We'll figure something out." We decide to send Grace to stay with my parents in a nearby town while we deal with the investigation. It breaks my heart to be separated from her, but I know it's for the best. I need to keep her safe, no matter what. As I pack Grace's bags, I can't shake the feeling that someone is watching me. I glance out the window, half expecting to see Frances's face peering back at me. But there's no one there, just the quiet street and the setting sun. I drive Grace to my parents' house, my heart heavy with worry and fear. When we arrive, my mother takes one look at my face and pulls me into a tight hug. "Oh, Beth," she says, her voice filled with concern. "What's happened?" I break down then, sobbing into her shoulder as I tell her everything. The wiretaps, the police investigation, the constant fear that someone is watching our every move. My mother listens patiently, her face growing more and more concerned with each passing moment. When I finish, she takes my hand in hers and looks me in the eye. "Beth, you're doing the right thing," she says, her voice firm. "You need to protect yourself and Grace, and we'll be here for you, no matter what." I nod, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. Knowing that I have my parents' support means everything to me. As I drive back home, my mind races with possibilities. Who could be behind the wiretapping? Is it Frances, trying to gather evidence to use against me? Or is it someone else entirely, someone with a grudge against our family? I think back to the confrontation with Frances, the way she questioned my ability to be a good mother. Could she really be capable of something like this? The thought makes my blood run cold. When I arrive home, Doris is waiting for me in the living room. He looks up as I enter, his face drawn and tired. "Beth, we need to talk," he says, his voice serious. "I think I know who's behind the wiretapping." I feel my heart skip a beat as I sit down beside him. "Who?" I ask, my voice barely above a whisper. Doris takes a deep breath, his eyes meeting mine. "It's my mother," he says, his voice heavy with emotion. "I think she's been spying on us, trying to find a way to tear our family apart." I feel like I've been punched in the gut. Frances, the woman who has made my life a living hell for years, is behind this invasion of our privacy. The betrayal cuts deep, leaving me reeling with shock and anger. As I sit there, trying to process this new information, I feel a sense of determination wash over me. I won't let Frances win. I won't let her destroy our family. No matter what it takes, I will protect Grace and Doris from her toxic influence. Even if it means cutting her out of our lives completely, I will do whatever it takes to keep my family safe and whole. The revelation of Frances's involvement in the wiretapping leaves me reeling. I can't believe that my own mother-in-law would go to such lengths to undermine our family. The betrayal cuts deep, leaving me feeling lost and alone. I decide to confide in my father, Paul, hoping that his wisdom and support will help me navigate this difficult situation. When I arrive at his house, he takes one look at my face and pulls me into a tight hug. "What's wrong, Beth?" he asks, his voice filled with concern. I break down then, telling him everything. The wiretaps, the police investigation, and Doris's suspicion that Frances is behind it all. My father listens intently, his face growing more and more serious with each passing moment. When I finish, he takes a deep breath and looks me in the eye. "Beth, I know this is hard, but you need to stay strong," he says, his voice firm. You have to protect yourself and Grace, no matter what. I nod, feeling a sense of determination wash over me. I know, Dad, but I don't know what to do. I feel like I can't trust anyone anymore. My father takes my hand in his eyes filled with compassion. You can trust me, Beth. I'll always be here for you, no matter what. We decide to return to my house together, hoping to find some clues that might help us uncover the truth. When we arrive, the house is quiet and still, with no sign of Doris or Grace. As we make our way through the rooms, I can't shake the feeling that something is off. The air feels heavy with tension, and I find myself jumping at every unexpected sound. Suddenly, I hear a noise coming from the bedroom. My heart races as I push open the door, my father close behind me. There, crouched by the bed, is Doris. He looks up at us, his face pale and his eyes wide with fear. Doris, what are you doing? I ask, my voice shaking. He stands up slowly, his hands trembling. Beth, I can explain, he says, his voice barely above a whisper. I look down at his hands and see that he's holding one of the wiretaps. My stomach drops as I realize what's happening. Doris, you set this up with your mother? I ask, my voice rising with anger. He shakes his head frantically. No, Beth, I swear. I found it here, just now. I was going to remove it. I feel my father's hand on my shoulder, steadying me. Doris, I think you need to tell us the truth, he says, his voice calm but firm. Doris takes a deep breath, his eyes filling with tears. It was my mother, he says, his voice breaking. She convinced me that Beth was cheating on me, that she was an unfit mother. She said she had proof. I feel like I've been punched in the gut. And you believed her? I ask, my voice barely above a whisper. Doris nods, his face etched with shame. I'm so sorry, Beth. I never should have doubted you. I let my mother's lies cloud my judgment. I turn away from him, my heart breaking into a million pieces. The betrayal is too much to bear, the pain too deep to ignore. My father steps forward, his face hard with anger. Doris, I think you need to leave, he says, his voice leaving no room for argument. Doris nods, his shoulders slumping in defeat. I understand, he says, his voice heavy with regret. I'll go. As he walks out of the room, I feel a sense of numbness wash over me. I can't believe that the man I loved, the father of my child, could betray me like this. My father pulls me into a tight hug, his voice soft and comforting. Beth, I know this hurts, but you're not alone. We'll get through this together. I nod, feeling a sense of strength wash over me. I know that the road ahead will be difficult, but with my father by my side, I know I can face anything. As we stand there, holding each other in the quiet of the bedroom, I feel a sense of determination wash over me. I won't let Frances win. I won't let her destroy my family. No matter what it takes, I will protect Grace from her toxic influence. Even if it means leaving Doris behind, I will do whatever it takes to keep my daughter safe and happy. The days following Doris's confession are a blur of anger, heartbreak, and disbelief. I can't fathom how he could have believed his mother's lies, how he could have doubted my love and loyalty. I find myself constantly replaying our confrontation in my mind, the look of guilt and shame on his face as he admitted to his betrayal. The pain is almost too much to bear, but I know I have to stay strong for Grace. One evening, as I'm putting Grace to bed, Doris comes into the room, his eyes red and puffy from crying. Beth, can we talk? He asks, his voice barely above a whisper. I nod, tucking Grace in and kissing her forehead before following Doris out of the room. We sit down on the couch, the tension between us palpable. Beth, I'm so sorry, Doris begins, his voice breaking. I never should have believed my mother's lies. I never should have doubted you. I feel my anger rising, my voice shaking as I respond. How could you, Doris? How could you think I would ever be unfaithful to you? How could you let your mother manipulate you like that? Doris hangs his head, his shoulders slumping in defeat. I don't know, Beth. I was weak. I let her get inside my head, and I didn't trust my own instincts. I shake my head, tears streaming down my face. Do you have any idea how much this hurts, Doris? How betrayed I feel? He nods, his own tears falling. I know, Beth. I know I've hurt you deeply, and I'll never forgive myself for that. We sit in silence for a moment, the weight of his betrayal hanging heavy in the air. Finally, I take a deep breath and look him in the eye. I need to know everything, Doris. What exactly did your mother tell you? What made you believe her? Doris takes a shaky breath, his voice barely audible. She told me that the neighbors had seen you with another man, that they had proof of your infidelity. She said that you were an unfit mother, that you were neglecting Grace. I feel my heart shatter into a million pieces. And you believed her? Without even talking to me first? Doris nods, his face etched with shame. I'm so sorry, Beth. I was a fool. I let my mother's words poison my mind, and I didn't trust in our love. I stand up, my body shaking with anger and hurt. I can't do this anymore, Doris. I can't live with someone who doesn't trust me, who lets his mother control our lives. Doris stands up, his eyes wide with panic. Beth, please, I'll do anything to make this right. I'll cut my mother out of our lives completely. I'll go to therapy. I'll do whatever it takes to earn your trust back. I shake my head, my voice firm. It's too late, Doris. The damage has been done. I need to protect myself and Grace from this toxic environment. I walk towards the door, my heart breaking with every step. I'm taking Grace, and we're going to stay with my parents for a while. I need time to think, to figure out what's best for us. Doris falls to his knees, his voice desperate. Beth, please don't go. I love you. I can't live without you and Grace. I turn to face him, my eyes hard. You should have thought of that before you let your mother destroy our family. With that, I walk out the door. My heart shattered, but my resolve strong. I know that the road ahead will be difficult, but I also know that I'm doing what's best for myself and my daughter. As I drive to my parents' house, Grace sleeping peacefully in the back seat, I feel a sense of clarity wash over me. I know that I deserve better than a husband who doesn't trust me, who lets his mother control our lives. I vow to myself that I will build a new life for Grace and me, one filled with love, trust, and respect. No matter what it takes, I will protect my daughter from the toxicity that threatens to engulf us. And as for Frances, I know that she will face the consequences of her actions. I will make sure that the truth comes out, that everyone knows the extent of her manipulation and deceit. But for now, I focus on the road ahead, on the promise of a brighter future for Grace and me. I know that we will emerge from this stronger, more resilient than ever before. Settling into life at my parents' house is a challenge, but their unwavering support and love make it easier to bear. Grace seems to be adjusting well, finding comfort in the familiar surroundings and the doting attention of her grandparents. As the days pass, I find myself growing stronger, more determined to uncover the truth behind France's manipulation. With my father's encouragement, I decide to confront the neighbors who were allegedly spreading rumors about my infidelity. Armed with a newfound sense of purpose, I make my way to the first neighbor's house, my father by my side. When Mrs. Johnson opens the door, her face falls as she sees me standing there. Beth, I'm so sorry, she begins, her voice trembling. I never meant to cause you any harm. I take a deep breath, trying to keep my anger in check. Mrs. Johnson, I need to know the truth. Did Frances tell you that I was cheating on Doris? She nods, her eyes filling with tears. She did. She said that she had proof that she had seen you with another man. I feel my heart sink, the weight of Frances's lies crushing me. And you believed her? Without even asking me first? Mrs. Johnson hangs her head in shame. I'm so sorry, Beth. I should have known better. Frances can be so convincing, and I let myself get caught up in the gossip. I nod, my anger slowly giving way to a sense of betrayal. Do you have any idea how much damage your words have caused, how much pain you've inflicted on my family? She shakes her head, tears streaming down her face. I'm truly sorry, Beth. I never meant to hurt you. I'll do whatever I can to make this right. My father places a comforting hand on my shoulder, his voice calm and steady. Thank you for your honesty, Mrs. Johnson. We appreciate your willingness to set the record straight. We leave her house, my heart heavy with the knowledge of just how deep France's manipulation runs. As we make our way to the other neighbors' homes, the story remains the same. Each one admits to being taken in by Frances's lies, to spreading false rumors without any proof. By the end of the day, I'm exhausted, my mind reeling from the extent of Frances's deceit. But I also feel a sense of vindication, knowing that the truth is finally coming to light. When we return to my parents' house, I find Grace waiting for me, her face etched with concern. Mom, are you okay? She asks, wrapping her arms around me. I hug her tightly, my voice thick with emotion. I will be, sweetie, I promise. That evening, as I tuck Grace into bed, I hear a knock at the front door. My father answers it, and I hear the sound of raised voices coming from the living room. I make my way downstairs, my heart racing as I see Frances standing there, her face twisted with anger. "How dare you turn the neighbors against me?" she spits, her eyes blazing with fury. I feel a surge of strength coursing through me, my voice steady and calm. "I didn't turn anyone against you, Frances. You did that yourself, with your lies and manipulation." She scoffs, her voice dripping with disdain. "You've always been jealous of my relationship with Doris. You've been trying to turn him against me for years." I shake my head, my voice rising with each word. "No, Frances. You're the one who's been trying to turn Doris against me. You're the one who's been poisoning our marriage with your lies and deceit." My father steps forward, his voice firm and unyielding. "I think it's time for you to leave, Frances. You've caused enough damage to this family." Frances's face falls, the reality of her actions finally sinking in. She turns to leave, her shoulders slumped in defeat. As the door closes behind her, I feel a sense of relief wash over me. I know that the road ahead will be difficult, that the wounds inflicted by Frances's betrayal will take time to heal. But I also know that I'm not alone. With the love and support of my family, I will find the strength to rebuild my life, to create a future filled with trust, respect, and happiness. And as for Frances, I know that she will face the consequences of her actions. The truth has a way of coming to light, and she will have to live with the knowledge of the pain she's caused. But for now, I focus on the present, on the love and laughter that fills my parents' home. I know that together, Grace and I will emerge from this stronger, more resilient than ever before. In the weeks following my confrontation with Frances, I throw myself into building a new life for Grace and myself. With the support of my parents, I find a full-time job at a local bookstore, relishing the opportunity to immerse myself in a world of stories and imagination. Grace continues her swimming lessons, finding solace and joy in the water. I watch her glide through the pool, her face lit up with a smile, and I feel a sense of pride and love wash over me. One afternoon, as I'm sorting through a new shipment of books, my phone buzzes with an incoming call. I glance at the screen, my heart skipping a beat as I see Doris's name. I hesitate for a moment, unsure if I'm ready to face him, but I know that I can't avoid this conversation forever. I step outside, taking a deep breath before answering the call. "Hello, Doris." There's a pause on the other end of the line, followed by a shaky breath. "Beth, I'm so sorry. I know I've said it before, but I need you to know how much I regret what I did." I close my eyes, feeling the weight of his words settle over me. "I know, Doris, but the damage has been done. I can't just forget what happened." "I understand," he says, his voice heavy with emotion. "I just wanted to let you know that I've started seeing a therapist. I'm trying to work through my issues, to understand why I let my mother's manipulation get to me." I feel a flicker of hope in my chest, but I push it down, knowing that I can't let myself get caught up in false promises. "That's good, Doris. I'm glad you're getting help." We talk for a few more minutes, our conversation stilted and awkward. When we hang up, I feel a sense of sadness wash over me, knowing that the man I once loved is now a stranger to me. As the days turn into weeks, I find myself settling into a new routine. Grace and I spend our evenings curled up on the couch, reading books and watching movies. On weekends, we explore the city, discovering new parks and museums. I hear whispers around town about Frances, about how she's become a pariah in the community. People cross the street to avoid her, their faces etched with disgust and anger. Part of me feels a sense of satisfaction, knowing that she's finally facing the consequences of her actions. But another part of me feels a twinge of pity, knowing that she's now living a life of isolation and loneliness. One evening, as I'm tucking Grace into bed, she looks up at me with wide, curious eyes. "Mom, do you think Grandma Frances is sorry for what she did?" I pause, considering my words carefully. "I don't know, sweetie. Sometimes people do bad things because they're hurting inside, and they don't know how to deal with their pain." Grace nods, her brow furrowed in thought. "I hope she learns to be a better person." I smile, feeling a surge of love and pride for my wise, compassionate daughter. "Me too, Grace. Me too." As I lay in bed that night, I find myself reflecting on the journey that brought me to this moment. The pain and betrayal, the fear and uncertainty, the strength and resilience that I never knew I possessed. I know that the road ahead will be difficult, that there will be challenges and obstacles to overcome, but I also know that I'm not alone, that I have the love and support of my family to guide me through. And as I drift off to sleep, I feel a sense of peace wash over me, knowing that no matter what the future holds, I have the strength and courage to face it head on. Because I am Beth Thompson, a survivor, a fighter, a woman who refuses to be defined by the actions of others. And I know that with the love of my daughter and the support of my family, I can overcome anything that life throws my way.